If everybody could stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. First, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight, especially those who traveled down from Rochester, and those who traveled up from New York City, and those who traveled locally. Since we do have a schedule that we're trying to keep everybody on because people have buses and trains to make, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes and start with the presentations and the interviews. And so what I would like to do is first introduce Kent Gardner and Lindsay Kingsley from CGR to come join us. And I'll do a quick introduction when you get up here of who's who, okay? Or you could go over there if you want, at the table, wherever you feel more comfortable. And we'll actually, let me, are these on, Chris? Is this on? It's on. Okay, do you want to, yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, come join
Kent down
us.
from Rochester. You could please come to the table.
I think so.
So let me just do a very quick introduction, and some more people should be joining us as it proceeds, but we have quorums for both boards. So we have Rosanna, who's our town clerk. We have Ariana from the village board.
Hello.
Stuart from the village board. Kitty is on the town council. Sally is on
And
the
we
village
met
board. Kevin is on the town board, and I'm Susan, the supervisor of the town of Newport. So with that, that's our introductions, and the floor is yours.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much. It's nice to be able to talk to you in person. Let me just say that we understand.
I'm just going to bring the microphone closer just so for the TV.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. It feels a little odd, frankly, to be what I think is we're the low bidder in this process. That's not a place where we usually find ourselves. And I think the question comes whether we've actually misspecified this project and underestimated the complexity of this project. So let me say that what we see this as a process by which we articulate what has to happen to get you to a referendum. So you need the intermunicipal agreement, and that agreement needs to satisfy, it needs to determine all those factors that affect the relative balance of burden for the town and the village going forward. Because eventually, as soon as that consolidation happens, you'll be one operating organization. So we don't see this, and we didn't specify this as an implementation plan. And we've done implementation plans. This isn't an implementation plan. This articulates how you divide up the responsibilities and how you divide up the cost in a way that fairly allocates, or fairly or not, simply allocates the cost of government on a going forward basis between town taxpayers and village taxpayers. So first let me talk a little bit about us. I venture to say that we have twice as much experience looking at merger, consolidation, shared service issues of anyone in the state, probably, frankly, the nation. We've worked in 75 communities in recent history. We've been all over, and we've done this in 4 states. I'm doing a 4-community merger study in suburban Cleveland right now. The borough and township of Princeton merged in January. So we've been working with Princeton now for 3 years. Princeton, we did the study for Princeton, we did the implementation plan for Princeton, and now they brought us back to do a kind of a regular check-in. We're kind of on a retainer relationship. They have us come in periodically and talk through how it's going. And that's been really a very interesting process, a very interesting project. I think very successful consolidation. We work with some that have turned into a merged organization like Princeton. And we've worked with many that have not. Most of these studies do not result in a merger. And some of them are for very good reason. I want to talk a little bit about the village of Mansville in Jefferson County. Village of Mansville just went to a vote in March. And Mansville is a little community of 400 people that sits right on I-81, about halfway between Watertown and Syracuse. And the people who live in Mansville just hop on I-81 and they go north and they go south. And they feel that the town board doesn't represent them. Once you get outside that little 400 hamlet there, there's hardly, there's all farms. So the town board is mostly agriculturally focused. And they said, hey, I think in the vote, we don't really mind taxing ourselves a little bit to be able to pass a dog leash law. There's no dog leash law in the town. They said, you know, we want to be able to pass a dog leash law. We want to be able to tax ourselves to be able to plant flowers in front of the village hall libraries combined. We want to take a little bit of money and add to the money that the library gets from the regional library consortium, because we think the library is important to us. And frankly, as a little community, the taxes aren't that bad. We're perfectly happy to keep it. We want to keep the village intact. I think that's a reasonable position for them to take. You know, I could talk also about Village of Malone up in Franklin County. Similar circumstance, concentrated urban area, rural area outside, and they decided as a Village of Malone that they wanted to remain intact. This is democracy. People get to make those decisions. The goal for this initiative is to first articulate what that balance of cost is going to be through that agreement. And it's also to make sure that a referendum occurs that is appropriate according to New York State law. Now, I want to ask two questions about this here, and you know, these are the questions I think need to be resolved. You know, first, is the merger consistent with well-established law? And obviously it is. We know that Governor Cuomo, when he was AG, was the principal force between the 17A legislation that was passed by the legislature, which significantly empowers those people who wish to consolidate government. So we know where Governor Cuomo stands. We know that the legislature not only supported 17A, but the legislature has also supported what is a very generous incentive package for communities to dissolve. Again, this is $1 million, as you know, for this community. That's a lot of money. So clearly the legislature and the governor are in the same place. Now you have chosen, I think appropriately, I really like the arguments that have been forward, to talk about coterminous town-village. And that is a road less traveled, right? So we know what happens when villages dissolve because we've done it in recent history. For you to go this coterminous route probably means you've got to get home rule legislation to do it. We expect to recommend that you do get home rule legislation, and that shouldn't frighten you. I mean, all that needs to do is to dictate the process by which the legislature agrees you have properly created this coterminous town-village. We know that your legislation is already been willing to support you in terms of the CETC, and we know that the governor's office isn't going to oppose this. Moreover, the way you want to do this is because you want to guarantee more democracy, not less, right? You want to be able to say that both communities get a referendum and get a say. So I cannot imagine an elected official saying, I'm not going to support this home rule legislation for fear that, you know, when the next election comes up, someone's going to say, well, you know, the assemblyman actually voted to support more democracy in New Paltz, and therefore I'm going to oppose him. So the home rule legislation, we think, is not difficult. It's not a heavy lift politically, and it probably is necessary because it is fuzzy right now in terms of the process of getting from point A to point B. I mean, it's just unprecedented. It hasn't happened in so very long, and it hasn't happened at all under the current configuration of the law. So we think that that's necessary. There's another question about the financial analysis. You know, when we say just in general terms, the financial analysis, you know, the question is not whether a combined town and village will be more cost effective for taxpayers. The debate has always been about how much money will be saved, not whether any money will be saved. Again, in our experience, again, lots and lots of communities in this state and in others, unless public safety is involved, the cost saving out of the box is usually modest. I know Fairweather estimated about 5%. And when you ask anyone at CGRG, what's the average savings we see in a town-village merger? Our answer based on our experience is, well, gee, it's about 5%. Public safety is different. You got a public safety function. In Princeton, you had a village, you had a township police, you had a borough police department, and because of that, you've got 24/7 coverage responsibilities, and being bigger really, really cuts your costs. So the very significant savings they're seeing in Princeton are largely cut because of that consolidation across public safety. So again, I think the savings are clear. We know that there's going to be some savings. But the question, of course, is whether the savings are enough to justify this. And I guess when you ask about redoing the financial analysis, you have to ask a question whether there's going to be a different answer that's going to change any minds. I don't think that people are going to be voting for or against this because it's, you know, a further on study says it's going to save $56.31 per household as opposed to $31.21 per household. You know, the finances are not going to drive this decision. People have different visions for the future of this community. What divides voters is a difference in visions. And so I think that in your community, you need to articulate those visions. You need perhaps you need a more of a civic engagement process. And we'd be happy to help with that if that's something we've done that in lots of communities, if that's something you feel you need. But I guess the bottom line for us is that we believe that the actual drafting component, the legal component of this particular issue is not dramatic. That you need to come to some agreement about what's going to be in that negotiated settlement between the town and village. And then it needs to be drafted. We're in a very good position to help you figure out what matters and what needs to be in that agreement. And then Linda is very capable of doing the drafting. So let me talk a little bit about our experience. I am not new to this issue. My first town-village consolidation study was in 1988 when I was an associate professor of economics at SUNY Potsdam. I was leading a research center, and we looked at the town and village of Messina for consolidation. 1996, I led CGR's team looking at the consolidation of the city of Buffalo and Erie County. And again, you know, organizational, and I've done a whole raft of these things. Now, Linda, admittedly, I'm sorry, Linda, she just doesn't have a whole lot of experience. She's only been working exclusively in municipal law for 27 years. She was a counsel to the New York Conference of Mayors. She headed the municipal law section for the New York State Bar Association. She was corporation counsel in the city of Binghamton, corporation counsel in the city of Rochester, and now she's on the faculty at Albany Law School. So I'm sorry that I didn't bring anyone with sufficient experience to be able to deal with the issues, but we do feel that we're quite well qualified to help you with both the substantive side of this, which is to say, what needs to be in this agreement? And that's really a question where you really need to understand how government works. It's not essentially a legal question. It's essentially a government management question, and that's what we're expert in. And then you need a very competent attorney to help you identify what that legislation, that home rule legislation needs to look like, and what that negotiated agreement between the town and village needs to look like. And with that, I'll stop yammering.
Okay, so we do have a set of questions, and I'm going to ask Sally Rhodes to take you through the questions.
You've anticipated some of the questions, but let's go down through them. And you talked about civic engagement, and that is one of our major concerns. We have a division in the community.
Okay.
Oh, well, for interviewing.
Yeah, but I think it's hard for people to hear you. Even I'm having a hard time.
It's not going to come this way for
so.
me. All right, I'll come over to you, kitty dear.
The mountain has just arrived.
You talked a little about civic engagement. That is a major ingredient here, because as we work together on coming up with the referendum components that we need to agree upon, a lot of the questions that we anticipate needing to answer are things that we want to talk with the community about. One being wards versus at large, those kinds of things. So are you available, and does your proposal to us take into account the need to come down and be with us for some of these sessions?
Yeah, we had not included a civic engagement component in our proposal.
Yeah.
You had asked for some help creating the agreement, and then you'd asked for the financial analysis. Civic engagement hadn't been included, but we're very willing to do that. We've done that in many, many communities. I think it's helpful to have somebody else do that. It's not quite a therapy session, but it's perilously close. So it kind of helps.
Maybe the boards need the first one.
So I think it is helpful to have someone else stand up who's an impartial party.
Right. Okay.
And again, I think from my perspective, I've been on record, and would be here too, to say that to merge or not to merge is a decision the voters have to make. Your job is to make sure that the voters make as an informed decision as possible. There are good arguments on both sides, and so I think we're in a position to independently say, hey, we're just helping you figure out what the answers are.
Okay.
So just so I just clarify, your fee does not include really any public,
None.
None at all, but
No.
does it include the public hearing that by law we have?
Yes, of course.
So it includes the public hearing?
Public hearing,
But
but
no
not
other
the-
public meetings with
That's
the
correct.
public?
That's
And
right.
if we wanted to have you help engage us with whatever,
would be an
that would be an additional cost that
Yeah,
we
that's
figure
right.
out?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Now, we talked a little bit about the Citizens Empowerment Act, and I think, and you understand that we're on new ground here. Susan and I worked very, very hard with Dr. Benjamin to get the law amended, which allows a coterminous government to be eligible for the Empowerment Act money, and it is $1 million, should the merger be successful. But of course, you also know that we have to define one or the other. We can't be a town and a village at the same time. And so I think the home rule legislation probably would include, I know some board members have a question, if you're a village form of government, which was the recommendation from the committee, it's an appointed clerk and an appointed highway supervisor. However, since we are in this new never land, how much flexibility, and that's something we're going to need to know, how much flexibility would we have if we decided we would really like to have an elected clerk as opposed to an appointed clerk? The elected clerk, of course, would be within the definition of a village clerk, but elected.
Well, I'll defer to Linda, but I do think that you've got a lot of discretion here.
As Kent mentioned, we do feel that you're going to need a piece of legislation to go through, just so there are not problems later. 17A does not specifically address coterminous. When you look at the ways you establish a coterminous community, this is not one of them. It's annexation, which you don't want to do because you want to give everybody a vote. And annexation doesn't give everyone a vote. Or it's creating a new village, a new town. None of those quite fit. So our position is we would certainly recommend to you that you do legislation. Once you're doing legislation, as long as we can get the members on board with it and it's special legislation, they could decide that it's acceptable to them to allow this coterminous town village to operate a little bit differently than the general provisions
still
of law.
not lose.
That's the beauty of special legislation.
Right.
It's possible, the first thing that'll have to happen is figure out exactly what your dream bill would say.
Right.
And then we go to them, we sit down with them, lay it out, and get a determination as to whether they're willing to do it or not. But it's certainly within the parameters of possibility as long as you're going through that special legislation.
I mean, it is a brand new kind of government in a sense, and we have so few of them across the state of New York. There's
Right.
not a whole lot of precedent to work against.
Right.
Princeton, interestingly, is neither a borough nor a township. It's just Princeton. They decided not to pick either form of government. They essentially created something new for New Jersey, which is, but that,
But
again,
New
they were
Jersey
able to-
law is different than New York, so let's not go there.
Well, but I think the precedent is interesting because you'd be creating something that really is to some degree new, and you have some
And that's why the home rule.
yeah, you have some
But
ability
we
to
would also
influence.
have to make sure that within that home rule legislation, the guarantee of the $1 million is still ours.
Of course.
Okay.
We did get that guarantee, and I have to say, I'm really taken aback to hear this new development about needing new home rule legislation, because the reason our committee chose this form is that we were pretty much assured that this was an accepted and approved method of merger. So this is an unsettling piece of news. How long does it take to get a piece of legislation like this through?
I think it could easily be done this session, this legislative session, so you can still do your referendum in the fall, provided your members, and they've supported legislation for you before, so I would assume they'd support legislation for you again, provided your members were willing to get it through this session. But you probably received assurances that coterminous is an acceptable way to merge, and it is. But the way you are wanting to become coterminous is not something that's ever been done, and in my opinion, and the opinion of a number of other lawyers I've spoken to, is not something that's established in the statutes. Because they're very, and even if you go to, if you're curious, you go to the Department of State's website, they have a legal opinion, which they have not withdrawn since the new law went through, which states the specific ways that you become coterminous, and this does not fit any of those provisions.
What is it about what we've done so
The
far
fact
that
that
does
you
not
want
fit?
everybody, you don't want to do an annexation, you essentially want to do a merger where everybody gets to vote. In an annexation, only the people being annexed, the town outside village, would get to vote. The village would not vote.
And that's how all previous
Well, they've either been
coterminous-
done that way, or they've been done where a new village is created that's the same size as the town, or a new town is created. But when you've got already an existing village and an existing town, the annexation is the way it's normally been,
Or
of the 5 cases,
dissolution if
it's
you're
been
getting
done.
rid of the
Right,
village.
Okay.
right.
You know, and the legislature does do this sort of thing routinely. It's not, again, you have to make sure that nobody objects. So long as you're doing something about which no one will object, they'll pass anything within.
So this, creating this piece of legislation is not obviously part of the package that you have submitted?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I
sure.
think we anticipated we would do
Oh,
that, yes. We
okay.
did that on our Batavia project. We had, now, they've ended up deciding to kind of table the issue, so the legislation hasn't gone through. But part of what we did to them, for them, because they also were a unique situation, they were a city and a town trying to merge, which again is, I don't think anyone ever opposed it being done, but it wasn't anticipated by 17A, so it wasn't clearly in 17A. We drafted the legislation, we have all the correct contacts up there to lead you through that process, and that was part of what we did for them.
And you should know that we have a member in the community who has been working on a lot of aspects of this, who is an attorney and who already has drafted home rule legislation. So,
Now, is this Professor Benjamin you're talking
No.
about, or someone else?
you know, this is someone else who's as interested in this topic as many of us are.
I'll just say one statement, but then I want to go on to the more questions, because, you know, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
keep
we
track of
wanna
time.
hurry.
But if it was so that we had to do home rule legislation, then I would say that that opens up the belief of what we said from the beginning. We could create whatever government we want, because we're asking for permission for this new government, and we could take the best of the town and the village, and we don't have to be bound by anything, and we could make a model government that we want if we have to go for home rule legislation. So I just point that out, but let's
And
go
that
back to
is,
the
of course,
questions.
what Ross has been saying all
I know, I
along.
understand that means
I'm
we no
just
longer
trying
have to listen to
find
say.
in your
Yeah.
I just want
proposal.
to repeat that means we no longer, if this is true, the way we're going to go, we no longer have to hear, well, that's the way the village does it, so we have to do it.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
That's right.
But I just want to find in your proposal where you talk about that, because I thought I had read it carefully, and I completely missed this whole issue about needing new legislation.
Well, yeah, we don't see this as a big as a big issue. You're thinking of this as a big thing. We were thinking that for you to get to a legal referendum in November, it was going to be necessary. We anticipated
see.
it from the very beginning.
Okay.
We see our principal job as getting you to a legal referendum, and you don't want to go having a referendum, having people approve a merger, and then you know, having somebody sue you and having to reverse the thing after the village hall's already been turned into a sushi bar. You know?
No, it's town
That's gonna
hall.
be town
It's
hall
gonna
meeting.
be on the
Excuse me.
It's an ice,
Get this right.
it's an ice cream parlor. Can you-
Okay.
Go ahead.
So now, another issue that has come up, and
We don't need more sushi bars.
no, we don't need more
We need
sushi
an ice cream
bars.
parlor.
Nor pizza parlor. But
Ice cream parlor.
we feel
Does this
it
have
is
to go-
very important, and we haven't decided finally, but we were leaning toward the idea that we would have a separate independent accountant.
Do the
um,
financial.
do the financials for us. And the village currently uses that firm as our auditors, and they would become financial consultants. And they have a familiarity with the community that would be, we think, helpful, because a lot of questions have come up about finance, and I think it's very, very important we all are very clear. Now, would that be a problem for you?
I don't think that it's necessary offhand, but
Well,
that's
I'd like to
their
hear
choice,
more
not
about that,
ours.
Because we don't know
Right.
what the
No.
process is.
Right.
So I'd like you to explain that for me, and whether or not we even need somebody
Mhm.
separate.
Okay.
And maybe those
Mhm.
people can be available for a consult for a few hours. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, for one thing, there's a difference between what an accounting firm does and what we do when we go into a community. One of the things that, and what Fairweather has done as well, and what Fairweather has done for you, which is to go through and split the budgets into their functional components, and then ask the question, and this is the thing the accountants, I mean, they just don't do this kind of thing, is to ask, you know, how these two separate budgets, you know, in their functional form, get merged into a single budget, and what the consequences are there. There are a lot of judgment calls involved in doing that. And accounting firms, that's not what they do. So it's one thing to audit your books. It's another thing to take these two. I'm sorry?
To develop a model.
That's right. I think that's a good way to put it. It's a modeling exercise. It's not an accounting exercise.
No.
You have to know enough about accounting to make sure that you put the two things together right. But it's really a different function. I mean, obviously, we'd be happy to work with the accounting firm if that's the way you'd like to go. I don't think that that's necessary. The other thing, too, is that this is something people hate. There is a level of irreducible uncertainty about this decision. And you don't know, at the end of the day, what the numbers are going to look like, because you're going to have a new governing board. You're going to have a new public works department, which is where a lot of the money is. You're going to have a lot of things that are going to be brand new. And the people who are in charge of those departments and the governing board that you elect, they're going to make decisions that are going to have implications. So again, you're going to have there's some irreducible uncertainty, and I'll tell you, the public hates that. It's really hard to stand up and say, you know, it's going to be about, they hate that word. They want somebody to tell them it's going to be precisely X. That's not something you're going to be able to get. And I think in some ways, you know, maybe we're better equipped to deliver that message. It's a tough message.
Is there any way that we can actually, maybe for the first time, develop a model that involves government efficiency? I mean, there's words thrown around left and right, and what I'm hearing tonight is something new. Is there any way where we can take this coterminous concept, because it hasn't been flushed out before, and flush it out in a way that really drives more efficiency? Maybe that, you know, in other forms of merger or consolidation, you don't have the flexibility to be creative or as creative. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do here based upon what you two know to really drive government efficiency, something we don't have right now, across the board.
You know, I'd love to be able to say, yes, absolutely, let's reinvent government. But I think
It's ripe to be reinvented, but go ahead.
But I think the fact of the matter is that when you get this new merged entity, there are some characteristics that you can change that make efficiency more difficult. And I do think that, and I get myself in hot water on this, but I think separately elected officials within the government particularly the town highway superintendent. When you have a separately elected highway superintendent, that's a very large part of your budget. And you've got someone who is separately responsible to the voters. I think it's really difficult to drive an efficiency program if you're a governing board and a mayor or supervisor. To drive efficiency when you've got a separately elected official who may be a competitor of yours in the next election, who is controlling a chunk of that government. So, but other than that, I don't know that there are a lot of structural changes you can put in place. So again, unfortunately, efficiency it's a ground war. You would love to be able to do it with missiles.
Misnomer?
No, it's not. We see, I mean, we work and what we do is local government. I mean, that's kind of what we do. And so we see governments that are at both extremes. I mean, I have my favorites, and my favorite county executive is
You don't have to
Tom.
say what it is, it's better not to say.
He's a long ways away. It's
Okay.
Chemung County.
Okay.
Tom Santulli down. And Chemung County has this history of just being really smart about local government. And I don't know why little Chemung County, has gotten lucky. They've had a string of really effective leaders, and I assume it has to do with the legislature as well as with the executive. But when those guys are really doing a lot right. Now, well, the folks I won't mention are at the other end of the scale. But
We need
anyway,
to let you
yeah,
get
I'm
a
sorry.
chance to
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
the rest of these questions.
Yeah.
Because
I'll shorten it.
In our proposal, we did not ask you to do an efficiency study,
Yeah.
and that's really what,
No, it's okay. I know what
It's-
Kevin's
it's
asking,
fine.
but it's okay.
okay.
I know what you're asking, Kevin. Well,
Now, just overall, it sounds to me like you have good relationships in Albany, do you?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm too.
With the governor's office, the comptroller? Okay, because as you pointed out when you made your opening statement, this is new territory, and there's a lot of confusion, and even on the Department Secretary of State website, coterminus is not addressed. So,
Yeah, I mean, Department of State sees us all the time.
okay, good. And how, just very quickly, and then we're gonna have to say goodbye, is how will you include the joint boards and our respective attorneys in the steps to getting to referendum?
That's a question I think we'd have to work out with you. I don't think it's something I can decide at this point. I think it's a process question we just have to get to.
And
Good answer.
And certainly to the extent you want the attorneys involved
Okay,
with any work I was doing, they would be involved.
great.
I think you need input from both of them in order to create the documents.
I just want to quickly go back to number one, the public information sessions. And I know that's not included in your proposal. I think the reason we would like to have our consultant here is that when we frame the referendum, the questions that we're getting from the public are going to be pretty technical, like can we have wards versus at large? And we would like the person helping draft our legislation to know those answers and be able to talk about them at a public meeting. So in the future, if we anticipate, say, half a dozen public meetings, could you give us, not right now, but
Yes, of
at
course.
some point, what
Absolutely.
you think that would?
Yeah, we'd like to do that. It wasn't asked for, but we would like to be involved to
Understood.
that level.
Okay, great.
And I think it is important to not, when we started putting together the legislation for Batavia, because we were asking the legislature to do something different, we actually put in greater public hearing requirements than under the consolidation law, because we wanted everyone to feel comfortable that there would be plenty of opportunities for public input, and I would probably encourage you to do the same
Yeah.
thing.
no, we have to, we know
Okay.
that.
Yeah, we,
Okay,
All
so
right.
before we wrap up, is there any other questions that we didn't ask that we should be asking?
or you'd like to ask of us?
Oh, loads of those, but that'll wait, I think.
Just that it's
Okay.
lovely to be back here after all
Welcome
these years.
home.
And it's nice to, and I'll be
Graduated.
seeing
The
you up
town's
in
a
Ryan.
lot bigger and the village is a lot bigger than it was 40
Yes.
years ago. Yeah.
So nice to have met you.
Thank you so much for the trip down. I will,
Linda, thank you
yeah,
so
I'll see when I
much.
come up to Rochester.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Welcome back.
Thank you.
No, we switched Squire and Sanders because this way, they're from, I screwed up when I put this together. It's okay, don't worry, sit down, I'll introduce who's coming up. I meant to put the people who were coming the distance the earliest, and somehow I put somebody from Newburgh at 7 and people from the city at 7:30. We flipped it. The 7 o'clock is going to be at 7:30. The 7:30 is here.
You had already
Okay.
switched it once, and I printed that out, and now you switched it again. Okay.
No, I was asked.
And is this the famous
We're
Matthew?
This is Matthew.
Good to meet you.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Last I've heard so much
Meet you.
about
Matthew
you.
Great.
Nuringer,
Great.
right?
Squire and
Yeah,
Jen.
Squire
Squire
Sanders.
And I'm Sally Rhodes.
Nice to meet you.
And this is Jeff.
Hello. Very nice to meet you.
Good evening.
And this is Kevin. Okay.
Hey, Kevin.
And Matt and Jeff work with Ken Bond through Squire and Sanders.
Okay.
So I've had the honor of meeting with Matt before and talking with Matt on the phone, but I never had the honor of meeting Jeff. So anyway,
And
Matt,
they had the advantage of hearing the questions. Good night.
I
Well,
think they're actually staying.
thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and thank you for all the time and work and effort that you've put into this over the past 2 years or so. We know that it's been a tremendous amount of heavy lifting already, and that you're looking for somebody to help you jump that last hurdle. And so what we wanted to do is, obviously the town and the village are not strangers to the Squire Sanders. The firm currently acts as bond counsel to both the town and the village. So obviously we are extremely familiar with the community. To address your first question, and I hope you don't mind if I address your questions while we go through, address your first question as far as accessibility. Ken Bond, who's the lead partner for this engagement, has been up here on a number of occasions and is readily accessible at a moment's notice to hop in his Saab and come up here as long as it doesn't break down on the way. And so both Ken, myself, is readily accessible from the city, and Jeff Pohl, who lives in Albany, is easily accessible as well. On the mediation front, whether it be community mediation or mediation with the boards, respectively, our firm, as we'll describe, and as you probably know, is a firm of about 1,300 lawyers. We're in about 30 countries. We have 50 lawyers here in New York, and many of those lawyers are expert mediators and neutrals. So in the event that we need somebody to serve as a neutral party, these folks are trained professionals in handling hostile or non-hostile relationships.
Let's hope we've gotten over that.
And I think we have. I mean, we've seen some of the newspaper articles. And,
If we haven't, we're all in big trouble.
right. The firm also has one of the largest public finance and local municipal finance practices going back to the 1800s. Ken Bond himself doesn't go back to the 1800s, but goes back to, I believe, the 70s. So he's got substantial,
The 1870s?
right,
Okay.
substantial amount of experience in this area. Our public finance practice and local municipal law practice is about 50 dedicated lawyers. And the reason I'm throwing these numbers out there isn't necessarily to impress you with figures or numbers. It's to show that no matter what the problem is, our lawyers have dealt with it before or have dealt with something very similar. And no matter what the problem is, we'll have somebody within a 30-second phone call or email available to address those issues. And so in our New York office in specific, we have employment lawyers who, in this particular consolidation, obviously one of the major issues, and a issue that is potentially a volatile issue, is what's going to happen to employees. Our employee lawyers deal with issues like that every single day. And I think on a more general and broad picture, we have M&A and joint venture lawyers who won't be that useful, but are there for reference points. So quickly, Jeff Pohl would like to give his background. Jeff is general counsel at Dormitory Authority. I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Well,
We could use you now.
I've been with Squires for about 7 months, but before that I had a long career in local government. I mean, local government with state government. But I started working with the local government committee in the Senate, and actually, as I was telling Matt, you know, I was involved in the Mount Kisco legislation many, many years ago, coterminous town village. After that, I went to the state controller's office, where first I headed up the municipal law section, So when Linda was at Conference of Mayors, I was doing, the advisory opinions of the controller. So I have a broad-based knowledge of special districts, Article 5G, municipal sharing agreements. I worked on, although now we probably don't say it with the same luster that it used to have, that CLASS program, which was that big joint investing program that MBIA had run. So I have a broad-based experience, I think, in local government and the issues that pertain. Then after the controller's office, I worked for a couple of years with another law firm and did local government on the bond issuance side and other stuff. And then, I went to the Dormitory Authority where I was general counsel. We're a conduit issuer for hospitals, nursing homes, not-for-profits, but we also do bonds for the state and construction for various SUNY campuses and CUNY campuses, including New Falls. And so I have a strong background in public finance as well. I mean, when Matt said that I would be coming, obviously I haven't been as involved in the process. I read the Fairweather report, when I learned that I would be coming. And I was listening to some of the questions that were asked, and some of them, my thoughts I jotted down. But, the fundamental issues to be addressed are the fiscal implications of the consolidation, which are short and long term. And frankly, I think your idea of getting someone else to work on the numbers, I think I've read, what little I've read, the consensus is you don't expect to see the immediate savings, but you need to know what they are. But the next question is also, and it goes to your public outreach, how the citizens will be better served. What are the goals you want to achieve? And that does require outreach, because it may not be savings. There may be other synergies. I think I read, I don't know what I was reading, that, for example, both of your, town halls or, need upgrades. So working together, I mean, there's a savings there. So I really do think you need to understand and sort of do your own checklist of what's going to happen. And then lastly, there are the legal issues, and there are many. I mean, I looked at this, and I think 17A, this new statute. I mean, I must admit, I was doing my healthcare financing thing at that time, but I read it. It's a straightforward law as far as it goes. But it does leave a lot of issues, unresolved. I mean, I agree with Linda on that, I'll be honest with you. Using it to dissolve a village is a relatively straightforward. I think that, gives you certain advantages. You could use special districts then to reflect, sort of your urban center. But I do think that the implications, I was surprised reading the Fairweather report. It's unique to coterminous town village, and when I'd seen it in the past, it was in the context of legislation. I can see a path, but there's some issues that would need to be resolved. So that's why I do think, keeping a team of experienced lawyers working with the other consultants is a good synergy to have, because the issues are going to come up. And then really, because in my mind, whether it be an agreement or legislation, it's really to document what the understanding, the business deal that the parties want to have. And I do want to the only other point I want to make, sort of to echo what Matt said. I mean, to me, this really is no different than the kinds of issues you would face with any merger of two different business entities. You got debts and contract liabilities, you have labor contracts, you got the property and equipment, and you got retirement insurance. All different issues, all something where I think a full-service firm, depending upon the issues, and full-service firm with a knowledge, an in-detailed knowledge of municipal law, you should be able to pull it together. And again, I would think you would want to work with the municipal attorneys. So that's sort of my take. Admittedly, I come at this, I wasn't involved with all the history, but I looked at the Fairweather, and I'm just giving you my impressions. And
I think that makes sense. And, to go into the history that Jeff referenced, I'll just give a quick history of myself and then a history with what the firm has done for New Paltz with regards to the consolidation since last year. Prior to coming to Squire Sanders, I was legislative director for a state legislator in New York, and was also an analyst at a hedge fund. So I've seen both sides of the world where we're actually getting things done in the financial sector in Albany, essentially doing very little, particularly where I was in the assembly minority, which is a tough place to be. But from that perspective, I have run campaigns. I've run for councilman myself, so I know what it's like to knock on doors and have to face the public when you make or looking to make decisions. And so from that perspective, we look at everything that we do as from a public, from a PR perspective. And so I think that when it comes to community outreach, having that experience in dealing, intimately with the public, it could be a strong value added. To go into some of the things that the firm has done since last year, Ken Bond and myself have participated in dozens of phone calls and informal meetings with various folks in the town of New Paltz and the village of New Paltz, discussing generally the consolidation and our thoughts with regards to the process around the consolidation. We've provided recommendations for how to establish a business improvement district in the event that one would be needed. We've drafted a joint consolidation resolution that could be deployed in the event that the consolidation is determined as the appropriate process. We've drafted several versions of a proposed consolidation schedule, giving the village and the town an idea of how long and what steps are needed to move this forward. And Ken Bond has presented previously to 2 town-village joint board meetings in the past. So our thought process is that we've been here for both as bond counsel and as consolidation, sort of informal consolidation advisor, and we'd be able to continue to hit the ground running without having to take additional time to spool up on the dynamic of this transaction, because we've already been in the thick of it. So taking that in combination with our well,
I'm sorry to laugh, because you've also already been involved in being bashed and trashed like the rest of us, so you've already been totally,
Right.
so you've already gone through the ringer, so you're on the other side.
Asking questions isn't bashing, Susan.
No, I'm sorry, Jason, people have, I'm not gonna debate it.
We're
We're not
in
debating it.
interview.
Please, go ahead, I'm
Can
sorry.
you talk about this 17A home rule thing and whether or not you think we will need to go down that path?
I am not prepared to answer that definitively. I will be honest, and I saw some issues that need to be worked through, but I can't say, reading the Fairweather, seeing what their recommendation was, knowing what I do about, having read 17A, which I say is largely a procedural statute.
Mm-hmm.
How you read it with some of the other statutes that are there, I would need to work through it. I'd also want to talk, I too have, worked with folks at the Secretary of State's office over the years. I think you'd want to understand carefully what needs to be accomplished, and then figure out if there is a path without legislation. I'm not, Ken and others who have looked at it may, but I'm not yet prepared to say it's absolutely not necessary. I just, think there are some issues that would need to be looked at.
But you also don't necessarily think it's necessary.
I can't say yet, is what I'm saying.
Right.
I think what we would want is some kind of official assurance that it's not necessary.
Okay, well.
And if we don't get that, then would you be willing to take the step to get this home rule legislation passed as part of your proposal and package?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now we're working on multiple bills in the legislature as we speak. We continue to maintain our relationships and have the ability to, literally churn out a bill, at least a draft of a bill in the format that needs to be that it needs to be introduced into either house, within the matter of a few days. So that's something that we've included in our pricing, and it's something that we've considered. And I think that's really why we believe that the law firm should be the primary entity driving the transaction, because you will need legal reassurances on matters of that nature and other matters. We do believe that consultants are also important. We mentioned in our proposal that we intend to use O'Connor Davies, who's also presenting this evening, to provide the financial analysis. O'Connor Davies is an accounting firm and a financial advisor. So they can provide, and I won't present for them, but they will be able to provide, my understanding from presenting with them in the past on consolidation to a group of about 120 elected officials in Westchester County, they can provide those types of services that you'll need to ensure that you're getting the math right. And we've reached out to CGR in the past as well. We think CGR is a great firm, and I think that there's a value add to have from firms like CGR, firms like ours, and firms like O'Connor Davies, sort of a trifecta to a certain degree. So instead of going through some of the items that we've gone through with
I'd
you in the
like-
past, maybe it'd
we
be
wanna
good to
get to
go through some questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had the advantage of hearing what they are, and
Well,
you've
I
answered.
didn't,
I mean,
Okay.
I know in
Go
the
ahead, tell me, it's
proposal,
okay, just go ahead.
So,
proposal, you have said you would be with us for sessions with the public, and you know about the fact that we got the law amended, so that's
yes, that
not
those would
even.
be incentive,
And
yes.
you heard the issue of whether, there is some concern, and you've already addressed it, and that is whether we have the flexibility of an elected clerk as opposed to appointed if we go to village. Okay. And you've addressed the independent accounting, and I know that the relationship that you have with the state is quite
Yeah, I mean,
good. Okay.
I spent 20-some, 34
all right.
years there.
So the big question,
But I also worked as a
Yeah.
town planning board attorney in a while, so
Um,
I've done that as well.
the big question I have for you, Matt, is how will you include the joint boards and their attorneys in the steps to referendum?
Right. Well, that's something we do every single day. We work with 150 municipalities and 150 local council on a daily basis. And so I think it's important that both outside council and in-house and town and village council respectively work hand in hand. And so we anticipate a very close and symbiotic relationship when it comes to working with local
both
council.
boards.
With both boards.
Either their designees, but both
Right, and actually, I
boards
think it's really
equally
important,
together.
and I think that further bolsters the idea of why a outside firm, a law firm, is necessary to work with both counsel. And we've served in this relationship in other transactions where you have two councils, one for two different municipalities, and we're advising as sort of a independent intermediary to both. And I think in that role, we can serve as sort of a check and balance for both as well.
If I could just ask a quick question, you had said that you were there when Mount Kisco created their co-terminus?
When they did the legislation to in effect ratify, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you I can remember it, I mean, it was somewhere between 77 and 85, so I'm not gonna tell you, but I did work on it, and you know, again, it's like anything else,
And they did a co-terminus townwide
Town
village concept.
they did.
So, I mean, they were taking a town and a village that was within the town and joining forces to act
Scarsdale
as a
Yeah.
but what
village.
route did they take to that?
Well, they, again, I can't speak to
Okay.
what they did before, but I remember that legislation was necessary to sort of put the final imprimatur on it. I'll be honest, I don't remember
Okay.
the issues that we had to address. A lot of it was, you know, as I remember, because a lot of what I did was real property tax driven, and there's other efficiencies, single assessment rolls. I mean, there seems to me there are synergies that should lead to certain
But there are
efficiency.
also not synergies because it was done before the citizen
No,
empowerment.
17A, right?
No, but that's,
So-
no, but he's talking about the synergies of the savings that you get by
Right.
bringing
By
two
not
communities
duplicating.
together, not the synergy of how to get it done
No, right,
legislatively.
no,
He's
that's-
talking,
I'm mis-
It's easier to get it done now than it was
Yes,
then.
absolutely.
no, I understand that, but the synergies he was talking about was relative to the
Mm-hmm.
synergies of two entities coming together and seeing certain savings is what he was talking about.
And as you point out, I mean, there's significant state dollars attached.
Right, you have the $1 million, which based on our analysis, the town village would be entitled to. Obviously, 70% of that has to be used for direct property tax relief, but still, you have 300,000 additional dollars for general purposes.
Property tax relief.
Right, keep going.
What questions do you have for us?
When can we get started?
Does any board members have any other questions? I'll just introduce, Jason's the mayor who walked in. He came in a little late.
Hi, Mayor.
That's Matt. And
So I do have one question. Whether or not consolidation is even a good idea is a controversial question in New Paltz at the moment. So is there any point at which you would recommend pulling the plug? Is there a part of your process where you would just say the risk or the cost just isn't worth it, that the results are too unpredictable given the benefits, or is it just a matter of, in your view, every place would benefit by consolidating?
Well,
Because you're being asked to bring this to referendum in the context of a community that's not united around the basic premises of the question. So you're inserting, as every firm would be, inserting themselves in one side of a political discussion in New Paltz. It's a tricky position to put yourselves into.
Well, and again, my view, as I said, I mean, there are a number of drivers here. One is, what do you hope to achieve? We can't answer that. I mean, Matt may have a different, but I can't. We won't try to answer that as lawyers. We will try to help you understand what legally you can do and can't do based upon what you think your goals are. You also, I think, have to look at the cost, short-term, long-term. I think there seems to be conventional wisdom. Short-term, there may not be immediate savings. You got to look at some of these potential synergies, as I tried to define them, and see if you can see over a longer term that there are going to be benefits that come from that. But again, those are yours assessments. I think our job, as I said, as lawyers, is to figure out the legal path to get there, help you address some of the other issues that are sure to come up, the labor and employment, try to minimize any adverse consequences that come out of it. But in the end, and then to make sure that the agreement, that's referenced in 17A or legislation if necessary, reflects what you want to accomplish in a legal way. That's my response.
And I would agree with that 100%. And I would also say that I think that's the beauty of this, the governor's legislation, is that it empowers both municipalities or multiple municipalities that are involved in these transactions to come to the table for an extensive period of time and flesh out a consolidation agreement that meets those interests. And if you can't do it, then you just don't do it. And also, it also empowers the voters to come up and make that decision as well. And I think, like we said earlier, we're happy to participate in as many public forums as possible to provide clarity in the legal issues so that the public can make an informed decision. And at the end of the day, it'll be their decision. So I think that's where we stand in a support role.
Sally did ask me to read, I'm sorry, Ariana.
Oh, yeah.
Sally did ask me to just read this one thing that was in your proposal, that was in the proposal. Upon reflection, adopting the plan has been a stumbling block for the joint boards to proceed under the Act. We have pointed out and reiterated that the Act contemplates that the decision to consolidate the town and village or not to is a decision to be made by the voters, not by the municipal officials. So Sally asked me to read that. So anyway, go ahead, Ariana.
I did have a question just to follow up. You were saying that you're happy to come up here for as many meetings as possible. So that would be included in the entire fee, even if we ended up having like 25 meetings.
Right.
I just wanted to ask because we don't actually know how many meetings we are going to have.
New Paltz
and it would be great to have you at all of them.
Sure. New Paltz is an important client for us. Obviously, like we said, we represent the town and the village. And we see this as an exciting opportunity, not just to be a service provider, but a partner. And so partners willing to come to the table and be a part of that process as much as you need us to be, and for that fee.
Okay, thank you.
Kitty, Stuart, I think you had a question?
I do. I'm fine.
Okay, so I think it's about 35 public meetings that you'll have to come to.
Okay, great.
Wait,
Bring the,
do we have to come?
I was just going to say.
No, we're going to leave them.
Thanks so much
No,
for your time.
since Jeff
Thanks again
worked
your
for the
work.
dormitory
Appreciate it.
authority, he might get free rooms.
No, but actually,
All right,
we could probably help you.
take care.
We could probably help
Good
you
to see
pilot
you.
this with our
Yeah.
pilot program right
Take
now.
care.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thank guys for
Bye-bye.
coming up.
They're trying to
Okay.
break ground in June.
Okay. Next we have Tarshish, Katina, Lieberth, Mahone, and Milligram. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah, but only Mr. McKay
But only
is
Joe
here.
McKay is here. From Tarshish, Katina, whatever. But it's, okay, anyway. Okay, so this is Joe McKay.
And this is Michelle Ryder. Michelle's a
Hello,
partner in the
Michelle.
firm.
Okay.
Joe.
And
Now,
since you guys
Met
hi.
before.
Yes, hi.
You
Hi,
guys
Joe
are-
The
McKay.
village has met
I'm gonna do it very
before.
quick.
I'm Sally Road.
Hi.
You guys
Nice, nice meeting you.
Me too.
So,
Sound like
do you need me to go around and tell you who everybody is, or you're okay now?
No, we're all, we're
I think
town
we're
board,
okay.
village
I
board.
think we're okay.
Okay, great.
Figure it out as I go through.
Okay, great. So, what we'll do is, the floor is yours for a little while, and then we'll ask questions. So if you want to speak first, feel free.
Sure.
And thank you for being accommodating with changing the time to accommodate Squire and Sandra so Matt can get back to New York City.
I just want to say that we're getting notice from folks at home that we can't be heard.
Okay, we
so
can't, or
I
they
just
can.
Everyone. I just want to
Okay.
encourage everybody to use. Well, you two
Use
have
the
been using it pretty well, but I want to encourage everyone else to use the microphones.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
we
So
had
you
provided-
gotta try to use,
That means you too.
We had
Since-
for,
and you gotta
You really
talk into
gotta,
the mi-
you know.
You have to talk into the
have to talk
microphone.
like
You have to talk into the microphone, and they have to be on. Let me check it's on.
They're
Yes,
on.
it is.
Okay.
Okay.
okay, we had provided both boards with a proposal. I assume everybody has
Yes.
one. We do have additional proposals if anybody needs one to follow along. Of course, we're very interested in representing the town and the village as they go through the process. I could see from some of the questions I heard when I was sitting in the audience that there may be a question as to whether or not this is working now. As to whether or not the attorneys or even the CPAs would be representing one side or the other. And I think the gentlemen that were up here before answered it correctly. You know, this is a joint process for both boards to reach an agreement and bring that by way of a consolidation agreement to the voters. So to that extent, I see our role as attorneys as umpires, so to speak. We call balls and strikes. We will tell you what the statute says. We'll tell you how to comply with it to reach your goals. Now, of course, this is a new statute. There are no decided cases. So basically, we're going to have to look at the text of the statute, give you the best guidance that we can. We'll tell you when we think you've deviated too far one way or another from the statutory text, and to guide you through the process. The other thing that I think we need to discuss is a time frame and a timeline. In some of my initial review of this, I know that there's some funding deadlines that are in place, and those deadlines may or may not jive with the deadlines that you need to reach in order to put this on for the referendum. So that's something that I know I want to make clear with both boards from the outset so we can help you reach your goals. But again, I see it very much as down the middle of the road legal advice so that both boards can reach their goals. And we're not a party in interest. We don't represent the village or the town, but simply represent what comes out as being the joint interests of both of the bodies.
Okay.
Okay. I guess I have a little bit of a different tact on this because I'm a private sector person. So Joe's a municipal lawyer. I'm a private sector, basically corporate and commercial attorney, CPA. I work on a lot of business transactions, consolidations, mergers, and those kinds of things. I've sat on not-for-profit boards. I was on the steering committee for the merger of the Orange and Dutchess United Ways last year, where we had some cultural issues in terms of how do you bring them together and build consensus, because it's never going to be 100% consensus, and how do you keep moving that ball forward. We worked with outside consultants initially in that, and we did use outside counsel, even though we had a couple of us who were counsel on the board. So I'm, I guess, what you would call a counselor in the process. We will certainly be very clear from the standpoint of this is what our interpretation of the law is, where we think the confines are, and how that's going to meet your needs from a time perspective and an interpretation perspective. But I think the value added from whoever you choose as an advisor is how do we help you through that decision-making process and help you sort of bring the constituencies together to good decision-making processes. And that's something that certainly I've done, I know Joe's done in a number of different contexts. It's never our decision to make. As you pointed out, Mayor, we can't take sides in that. But you know, there are ways to communicate and make sure that people have all the information that they need to get to efficient decision-making and decision-making that they can all get comfortable around. It's never going to be 100%. So, you know, in terms of the way that Joe and I anticipated working together, as I said, Joe's a municipal attorney. This is his bailiwick from the standpoint of working with the municipalities, looking at the legislation, trying to figure out how to move that ball forward. The piece that he had asked me to sort of discuss with him and come in and propose on is really the financial analysis piece. I can read balance sheets. I practiced as a CPA for years before I entered the legal profession, so I tend to look at financial statements a lot. I don't know what your internal expertise are in the town and village in terms of your internal financial people and the sophistication that they have, and how much hands-on help they're going to need in developing the cost savings. So I think that's the piece that remains to be seen as you work through this. How much outside help do you need? I think as I walked in earlier, the prior gentleman said sometimes you need a team to do that. I typically start from the standpoint that you don't really need a team to start with, and if I feel that it would be more cost effective for the municipalities to not use counsel, but to use an outside consultant or an outside accountant, I would make that recommendation at the time, and a lot of that really depends on the expertise that you have in-house. So I think until I met with those people, I wouldn't really be perfectly suited to advise you on that, but I certainly would get started, and if my price point is not where it needs to be, I would recommend that you bring in supplemental help at maybe a lower price point, if that works. Okay.
One of the things I pointed out in the proposal was, of course, you need to know what kind of experience the law firms have that are coming before you. Of course, this is a new statute. In the last several years, there have been a number of villages that have dissolved. But there are very few that have gone through the new Reorganization Act to actually form a new type of governmental entity. We happen to have two clients of the firm that have similar circumstances. One actually was this situation in reverse, where we took a section of an existing town that existed for 150 years and actually created a village. Now, the reason that I think that that's important is the process is virtually the same. Of course, it's the process in reverse, but it is the same process. What the two boards need to do, of course, is get a plan together so that the assets from both entities become assets of one entity, and to set up that organization of government, whether that's going to be a town form of government or a village form of government. And essentially, I've actually done that. I represented one client from the point at which they sat down and completed the petition forms, right through litigating over the petition, holding the elections, fighting the appeals, and then swearing the officers into the new government once the voters had passed that referendum.
And that was on dissolving a village or creating a village?
It was actually creating a village.
Okay.
In Orange County?
In Orange County.
Blooming Grove, correct?
It was South Blooming Grove, correct. And of course, the process then is to swear in the board, just as you're going to do with the new government, the process of dividing up, in that case it was dividing the assets and dividing the liabilities. And here it's going to be the opposite. But a lot of the situations that come up aren't necessarily within the text of that statute. You're going to have issues concerning fire districts versus fire departments. You're going to have issues concerning water and sewer districts, and providing services to all of the town and village residents. So the reason I mention that, of course, is even though it was the process in reverse, I've been there to do all of those things before. And the village still exists, and hopefully it will be in existence for a long period of time. And we also have another client that we represent that has a somewhat mixed form of government, where it's a village which is not completely coterminous with the town. So there are some interesting district issues that we run into there, property ownership issues, providing services, and they're the same issues that these boards are going to have to discuss, come to an agreement on, and put a plan before the voters.
So with that, should Sally start to ask you the question? Okay, so Sally?
Okay. You did not, oh, I'll use this one.
Okay.
I'm going to have to get it out of here.
Okay, try to see if this Sally.
Oh, okay. Is that one working?
I don't know, talk into it.
No.
Yeah, no, it's working. I can hear you through this.
Can you?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you now, or did I turn it off? Talk.
Okay. Art, can you?
Okay.
Okay, good. Would it be possible for you to give us, rather than an hourly rate,
So it's working.
a proposed figure for both accounting and legal?
called a flat fee.
It's called a flat fee.
Yeah, flat fee. I mean, you do have experience, so I assume that you have some knowledge and experiential exposure, which would suggest.
Or at least an estimate. It's awfully hard for us to compare.
Kitty, take the microphone.
Or an estimate, because it's very hard for us to compare what you've given us with the actual flat fees that we've gotten from other people.
Okay, I can answer this.
Yeah.
Okay, so as the partner, typically, I mean, do we ever give flat fees? Occasionally, rarely. Usually that takes a lot more dialogue back and forth. You know, the comment that was made earlier is, so if we have 25 meetings, I hope for all of your sakes you don't have 25 meetings. I hope that we can all work effectively together enough, but you might have them. So sometimes we'll do a blended fee where we'll say, okay, there's a certain expectation where this is what we think it's going to take under reasonable circumstances with some buffer, and build that into a flat fee, excuse me. And then if we exceed those certain parameters, it goes to hourly. So we would entertain doing that if that's what makes the difference for you. I think the important point that Joe made tonight is because there are no published cases on the implementation of this statute. That's a little bit of a wild card, I think, for anybody. So, you know, that's built into flat fees in certain circumstances. We would have to build in some buffer for that. So it's not necessarily the case that an hourly fee is going to come out as high or higher than a fixed fee. If we need to sharpen our pencils and look at that kind of an arrangement, I think that there are a few questions we would want to ask in terms of what's the sophistication level, especially on the accounting side. What are we going to be dealing with? How much, you know, nuts and bolts accounting do you expect your advisors to give to your working staff people? And that I can build from there, because you don't build a flat fee without thinking about hours. It's that simple. You know, we don't just pick it out of the sky. It's like, okay, how many hours do we think we're going to have to assign to this kind of work? How much buffer do we have to build into there? And I think the untested statute and just trying to get a bead on really how many intensive meetings and over what time period are you looking to do this?
And just as a follow-up point, I mentioned earlier that over the last several years there have been a number of villages that have dissolved, and that was generally done under the prior existing village law. This is a new process. I think Seneca Falls is one of the first municipalities to go through the process. And in one variant or another, this experiment here in New Paltz has been going on for a long time. It seems to me that inherently here there's a rub. You know, there are people who feel strongly one way, people who feel strongly the other about retaining the village or creating some new form of government. We can get you there. I can get you there. And believe me, I've been to a lot of late night meetings in New Paltz, and I'm ready to go again. That's not really the issue. But the question is, and I know you've done a lot of background work on this, in order for us to help you, I always tell my clients that the client that's better prepared, that's the clients that's more aggressive on their own behalf, always has better results. And that goes into fees as well. Certainly, and this is what Michelle touched on, if you have an organized budget information, you can provide us with a list of assets that we can review, but we don't need to spend a tremendous amount of time on those issues. If you have ideas which we can put into the form of a draft plan, and those issues have meet with being contested at every step, well, that's going to cause the hours to increase. However, having said that, I think, you know, we've been here before. I've met a lot of you before. This is a project that we're very interested in, more than interested in. We want to take on this project. I've been practicing municipal law for a long time. I've created a village. I've done a lot of interesting things. I want to continue. This is the forefront. This is an experiment in politics, in the democratic process in New York State. We want to be there with you when you do this. If you need us to come back to you with some amount that you have in mind, then I would say to you, just don't let that be the factor that goes against us. If you have a certain fee in mind and you need us to meet some type of monetary threshold, talk to us.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Okay. Now,
I think we beat that one to death, so I want something to.
yeah, I think that, as you know, we were able to succeed in amending New York State finance law. And so the proposed coterminous government fits now under and it has the ability to receive the $1 million.
Yes.
And we're at that threshold. However, there is confusion and there is question as to whether under a village form of government we can have an elected village clerk or an elected highway superintendent. What are your thoughts on how we get there?
What's come up as we began our study process was that we were under the assumption that we could choose from some town options and some village options and put them together.
The ones you liked.
Right, exactly. And we're just not sure if that's the case.
Well, the law is very clear, Kitty, that we have to be careful in the coterminous government financial aspect, the $1 million, we have to declare which we're going to be. How tight is that declaration?
My understanding is that the boards were looking to consolidate to form a new governmental entity, not to form a village which was coterminous with the town. That's my understanding.
That's good.
And that's what the...
It was the form of village coterminous with the town.
Excuse me?
That is the intent.
It is a town-wide village.
A town-wide village under the new statute.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's all. That's my point. So under the new statute, the statute talks about this in two different places. It talks in terms of what the consolidation plan must include. And the consolidation plan must include a proposal that indicates the form of governmental entity, the rights, duties, and obligations of the proposed consolidated government, the territorial boundaries, the government organization of the proposed consolidated local government entity, insofar as it concerns elected and appointed officials. That would lead you to believe that you could define the new officers. However, in the preamble of the statute, it says essentially that two or more local government entities can come together to join to form a joint government entity of the type and kind which is authorized under the laws of the state of New York. So to me, that means that you're going to be looking at creating a town or village form of government.
Not a hybrid.
So
In other words, it's got to be something that's.
No, there's got to be one or the other.
So
It's not ambiguous.
if we go back to
I would
this,
caution the board that if you start picking and choosing from column A and column B, then you could be setting yourself up for litigation under
well,
the statute.
that's why we're interested in this new avenue of the 17A, because frankly, one of the reasons we went with this particular idea from the beginning was the hope that we could discuss in public the virtues of each and then draft a referendum agreement that seemed to be based on community consensus. So if we are, first of all, if you think we need to draft this 17A home rule thing, is that an opportunity for us to say we want to be able to mix and match?
Well, I'd like to paraphrase it by stepping back, by saying, do you agree that we have to do that home rule legislation in order to move forward? And then if we have to do that home rule legislation, that we have the
Okay.
ability to.
A two-part question.
Right. Because I don't think you can answer the second unless you answer the
Okay.
first, of whether you even believe we need to do that home rule legislation.
But except that if we have to do it, it sounds like that is our opportunity.
I agree. I agree.
So maybe we want to do it.
Well, we might, but
Okay.
we want to know
What
if
do
we
you
have
think?
to.
But we have to find out legally,
Right.
can we?
Let's see what
Right,
they
so
think.
are you asking now whether you can seek home rule legislation to create a different form of entity not under 17A?
No, actually, let me, and if I'm wrong, correct me on the board. We were told by someone who spoke to us earlier that under 17A, I mean, I know the coterminous law, under 17A, that we actually, it doesn't allow us to do this, quote, townwide village concept under 17A, so therefore we have to go and ask for home rule through this legislative session in order to be able to proceed to move forward, which is surprising some people because the committee that had worked was led to believe by doing the townwide village.
You got that.
Right. So I guess we're trying to
We thought
understand that
that
new
was a
wrinkle.
pre-approved
Right.
model,
So,
basically.
so we're asking about the new wrinkle, if you believe we have to do home rule legislation to get to a townwide village, if that's what we believe we want, okay? And then we'll ask you the second question
Okay.
about our flexibility under it.
No. If you are looking to form essentially a townwide village that has either a town form of government or a village form of government, the statute allows you to do that.
Okay.
If you're looking to do something different, something that the statute doesn't specifically allow, then you'd be in a position where you'd need to seek home rule legislation to do that.
Okay, so just to clarify, according to your opinion, you don't think we need to do home rule legislation if we choose to be a village and operate under the guidelines of a village, or we choose to be a town-wide village but operate as a town, we operate under those guidelines, and we don't need home rule, and we could just move forward, put the plan together, and choose to put it up for referendum or not. However, if we want to sort of create maybe a little bit more of a hybrid of picking the best from the town and the village to create this new community of New Paltz,
Susan, Mike.
okay, this new community of New Paltz, then we'd have to go through the home rule to get this new, quote, government formed. That's
Yes,
your,
I
okay,
agree.
okay,
I agree.
okay.
But you would also then have to have in that home rule the fact that you are eligible for the $1 million. Because the $1 million amendment that we got for what was proposed says we have to say we're either A or we're B, but we can't be both.
But
I agree
we can
with that
talk
as
about
well.
later.
Right.
But
Okay.
Okay,
So that home
I
rule
agree.
would have to do that.
Well, it's not the home rule, it's whether the enabling legislation that gives this money would recognize that home rule
And that's-
municipality
Right, right, right.
as an eligible candidate
Right.
to receive
And
the
that's
funds.
another layer of question.
Okay, anyway, so
Okay.
Sally,
I think we dealt with the independent accounting consultant. What is your working relationship with Albany, with the Secretary of State, Controller, all of the functions that are
office.
going to be involved in this?
Well, we've done this, as I said, I've done this before. And the local governments were actually the issue as far as getting a consensus, so to speak. It was, the state has passed this legislation. It's pretty clear the purpose is to encourage this. I don't think we're going to have any issue whatsoever working with anyone on the state level, either in the controller's office or anywhere else, that would be any impediment to this. And as I said, when I did this previously, I was on the phone pretty much with the controller's office 3 times a week saying, look, this is what we intend to do. The cases don't address it because this is a unique situation. Getting an informal opinion from them, we certainly can get a formal opinion, although there's not much time left over in this process to get formal opinions. So that was never an issue before, and I don't see it as being an issue now.
And I think you spoke, but not so much
you, Joe, on how you will include the joint boards in the developmental process, getting to the referendum.
Well, what I would suggest is that we work together to set a time frame. The timeline is going to be pretty short here. I know that there have been committee meetings for lengthy periods of time with respect to this. Certainly, we put together a proposed time frame that the town board and the village board can meet, and then it's going to be your call as to whether we meet with smaller designees from each board to move the process forward. That certainly sounds like it makes sense in the beginning. And we will meet with you as often as is needed. Again, it's a new process. We're close by. We're only 20 minutes away. We'll be here, and we'll work with you to get on track and get that timeline together and give the boards whatever information they need in a timely way prior to the next meetings to make sure that they're fully informed and they can make good, sound judgments to keep the process moving forward.
Now, you began with saying if the board is aggressive, then you will need to do less. Are you prepared to be aggressive with the board?
Well, since this is a consensus, a process of consensus, I don't expect to be aggressive with my own clients. But what I would suggest is that we can work together to be better organized.
Well, okay.
It's better organized. It's organized, is what I meant.
I want to just add to that. I mean, I think that's the name of the game, is developing a schedule that everybody buys into. It says, okay, by certain dates, we want to accomplish certain goals and come prepared to the meetings. And then our job is to get materials to folks ahead of the meetings so that they have everything they need to come and really, make progress and have some decision points at certain times instead of just, the endless meetings we've all been through in different organizations. Schedules are critical to any kind of decision making when it comes to consolidation.
Great. Does anybody have any other questions from?
No, you answered them.
No?
Thank you.
Do you have any for us?
I have a lot of questions.
I mean, they can be asked in a minute.
No, I just, I don't think for this meeting. I'm very curious as to what kind of expertise you would have inside on the financial side and what we would be dealing with in terms of gathering data and information.
And that's a conversation that will need to be had.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to speak for the village. We have excellent people.
Good.
We have an excellent village treasurer.
And
I'll say that.
And I will just say, it's not that we have fine people. We're just going through a transition because we have a particular medical situation that we're dealing with. So that's why I can't answer you right now.
Oh.
Because we're dealing with it right now.
Right. So you're in transition. Correct.
It's okay.
Great.
But being loyal to the village, I had to say.
Okay. Thanks so much.
And being honest, I had to say that.
So nice to see you
Nice to see you
again.
again. Thank you. I'll leave these. I'm sure if anybody wants to take them home tonight, and read them.
Very nice.
You want to do everything this time? Sure. He's going to do the questions this time.
Okay. Thanks. Really nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time shift to accommodate for coming up. No? Okay. So, next we have Howard Prater from Jacobowitz and Gubitz, and I have to say that this must be a very important meeting because we also have some heavy hitters that are joining us.
It's the whole masthead.
Yes, it is.
Not quite.
Television is terrible on Monday night.
Oh, isn't it opening day of baseball?
Yes, it is. It's also April Fool's Day.
So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and I'll just introduce the board real quick.
Okay, I'm Gerald Jacobowitz. I'm senior partner of the firm and know New Paltz well.
Jason, can you turn the microphone? We just so the people home can hear.
I'm Jerry Jacobowitz. I'm the senior partner of the firm, Jacobowitz and Gubitz, and born in Ulster County. And Horace Greeley said, "Go west," and my father went east from Ellenville to Walden. So, I'm Howard.
If you could take the microphone.
Hello, I'm Howard Prater. I'm a partner on the municipal team of Jacobowitz Gubitz and have been in the Hudson Valley most of my life. I've represented the village and town of New Paltz at various times over the years, and graduated from New Paltz.
Do I need this mic?
If you can use that one,
okay.
if that one works. We just need mics.
Okay. My name is Ben Gailey. I'm a partner at Jacobitz and Goubitz as well. I'm the in charge of our municipal team at the firm, and a former resident of the village of New Paltz.
Okay, so we have Rosanna, the clerk, Ariana, Village Board, Stuart, Village Board, Kitty from the Town Board, Sally from the Village Board, Susan
I-
from the
I
Town
wrote that.
Board, Jean from the Town
Yes.
Board,
Nice to
Kevin
see
from
you.
the Town Board, Mayor
At the
from,
library.
Jason from the Village Board. So,
Good evening.
okay, so if you want to, start and talk and whatever, and then Sally could ask, or Kitty could ask
Kitty's gonna
questions.
Okay. Well, we sent you an information package from the firm to give you an idea of the breadth of our municipal practice. And as I made clear in our presentation to you in our submission, that although we haven't had experience with this particular statute that you want to work under and that you're currently contemplating, we have done everything else that kind of agreement requires and that process requires. All sorts of municipal agreements and intermunicipal agreements, to referenda, to defense of all sorts of litigation surrounding all of those items. So we're thoroughly familiar with how to go about a large municipal project and all of the issues that affect towns and villages, from the public finance aspects to the labor issues to the environmental concerns, issues regarding maintaining quality of life, and the fiscal impacts of any particular action you take. There are a number of questions that we have as to the process that you've been involved with, which made our coming here in our submission a little more difficult than it might have otherwise have been, because when we are usually retained for municipal work, we know exactly the roles that everyone is going to be playing. In this situation where you have the two boards that are going to be working towards reaching an agreement on consolidation, it's somewhat unclear to me what the role of the individual municipal attorney is that you presently have that represent your boards versus the role that we are to fulfill. If you are, we perceive that our role is to represent the united group to forging an agreement. But there are choices to be made during that process and decisions to be made by you that could affect various aspects of the outcome. And the village may have certain ways it wants to proceed and certain results it wants to see achieved. And the town may have others. And the choices that are made in negotiating those agreements will reflect those dynamics. So it's unclear to me whether your individual board's attorneys are going to be advising you as to those individual alternatives, or whether you want us to do that. So perhaps somebody can enlighten us as to that.
Why don't you tell us some of the questions you have, then we'll ask you some of the questions, and then we'll figure out how to answer.
No, I think that's only fair.
Can you answer that? I mean, I don't know if we have the
We
answer.
did invite our town attorney and our village attorney to be part of this process. I don't think we specified in what capacity that would happen, but since they separately have so much experience with the way that with the shared services that we have now, the ones that work well, the ones that are a little rockier, it just seemed that this is town and village getting along here, right?
I liked it I liked the
rocky. So we just wanted them to be available. We don't really know, basically, in what capacity, but to just perhaps illuminate some of the challenges.
Well, I guess I would ask the question maybe a little differently to possibly get to your answer, and I don't know if we could answer the question. So I want to ask you from a legal perspective, okay? Because when you say the village and town boards have to agree, you might have, I guess the question that I would ask is, does the village board as one entity have to have the majority agree on one's, the question? The majority of the town board agree on the question? Or could we say acting as two joint boards that are now acting as one to come forward with a plan on behalf of the community? Is it the joint board acting as one and just the majority? Because that would,
I believe it's the majority vote of each board has to approve.
Okay. So I asked that question though because then that would go back to probably answering your question about the two attorneys in terms of, the support we might go back to them for in terms of certain answers or something. But I would gather, if I'm speaking out of line for the whole board, anybody jump in, I gather we would be looking at you, if we thought we could do it with our two attorneys and just put them at the table, we would be talking to an outside attorney. Okay, we would just sit down with our two attorneys and, fight as two boards and come up with a response, come up with something. So I think we're looking at you guys as being sort of the independent people coming to the two boards, helping us to work through the issues we need to come to something consensus to say, okay, we could live with that, and that's what we would like to bring to the community potentially for a vote. So that's how I would perceive your role, and then the two attorneys would be our support when we need questions to understand if we're overstepping authority or maybe we're not thinking of something. But I think we'd be looking at you as sort of being the attorney for both boards, trying to bring us to an answer that's good for a community if we should decide to be one community.
All right, to reach a consensus on all issues.
Well,
we can't go
I think
forward.
there is an interim step there. And the interim step is that it's your job to help the two boards come up with a referendum item to present to the voters, but then each board individually by majority must agree to it. But the referendum item itself is a mutually agreed upon together at the table with your advice and counsel.
Well, the agreement that is part of the referendum has to cover all aspects of your future relationships. So there are choices to be made there that need to be decided, and a consensus has to be reached between the two boards before the referendum.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I think, if we can just start with our questions, I think that by the end of this session, maybe we'll all understand. So our first question is that we anticipate an unknown number of public information sessions. And those are the sessions where we anticipate asking the questions that really will define the referendum that we end up with. Like, which form of this do we want to do? And that's where we need a legal voice. We don't want to influence public opinion, but we want to say, here are 4 possible routes we can go down if we merge as a town or village. They're all legal. To do this, you go here. To do this, you go here. And that's what we need an attorney to be present for. So the public information sessions, could be half a dozen. I hope they won't be 25.
I bet more than 25.
But that's where we really expect to get answers to the questions we don't fully understand.
Okay. Because the way the process is supposed to work under the statute is you have a proposed agreement that then you have public hearings on. But what I hear you suggesting is before you even reach to that proposed agreement, you want to have a series of meetings and public information sessions. And those sessions are for the purpose of soliciting input or for educating the public?
They're for understanding what we can put in the referendum. When it says you must choose you must identify the kind of government you're going to be.
Yes.
Before we say we're going to be a townwide village, we want to have a public information session that says if we become a townwide village, it means we can conduct business in the following ways. And, for example, we would like to continue to have a volunteer fire department. Is there anything, if we go down this path, that will constrain us from doing that? Those are the questions that we and the public want to know.
How close is, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm going to clarify because I think that needs to be tightened a little. I think there are issues that even these two boards do not agree upon. And the question is, within the new Citizen Empowerment Act and the fact that we were able, Susan and I, and the help of Dr. Benjamin, were able to get the New York State finance law amended, allowing for coterminous to meet and be eligible for the $1 million. However, that amendment is very, very clear that you can't be both a town and a village. You must declare. The study that was done in the community that brought us to this point recommended a village town-wide. However, there is some moving room there, and we want help with knowing how much moving room there is, if in fact is a village form of government without jeopardizing our $1 million eligibility. Can we have an elected village clerk, or must we stay with a village form of government and have a appointed village clerk? And the same for the highway. And this is a real question, strongly felt by various members of the two boards, and that's the kind of thing we need an answer to. The flexibility that we have or don't have. And we can sit and speculate, but we are not attorneys, and this is a whole new area of law, and we need that kind of guidance.
Okay,
there are two things I think that we're saying here. One is that in the statute, there's a number of things that we're going to go through in terms of our form of government. And I think we might need to have a meeting on, maybe not every single one, but each one might be its own meeting and public session, where we might be getting, we definitely will get input during public comments period, but we might be getting public input, or we might just be talking about it ourselves. And we would love for you to be at those kinds of meetings. The second thing...
Use the nonpartisan example.
Well, yeah. I was just going to say, the second thing is the idea that we want to use some village things and some town things, and can we combine the two without jeopardizing our eligibility for the $1 million? So they both gave examples of these things, but I think those are the two tracks that we're talking about.
The purpose of these information sessions, though, then, if I'm understanding correctly, is to educate you.
And the public.
Right.
Because they're involved in it all. Yeah.
But the questions that you have are your questions.
Well, you know what, I think...
To start with.
Yes. For the most part.
I think
But if we're really going to come up with a referendum at the end of this, we need your help in getting to those 13 questions.
Right.
We will have to decide. If we can choose track A or track B, we will have to decide which one to put in the referendum, but we need your help in understanding if they're both available.
And if not, tell us they're not.
Yep, understood.
Do you want to go to the second question, or do you have more?
Maybe we should let them actually
Well, I have a question.
speak.
I have a question, really. I mean, the community has had a lot of meetings, right? A lot of public informational meetings, committee meetings. You have a number of reports and recommendations from Fairweather. You have a draft agreement. Has this brought the two boards close at all to a final decision? See, I thought, reading these, I thought you were.
I think that's a wonderful question.
Closer.
Well, no, I don't think, I honestly, I'm going to answer it because I honestly, I know what you're getting at. I don't think the two boards, the majority of the two boards, are far apart on trying to see if we could come up with a consolidated government that we feel comfortable with bringing to the voters for them to vote on. Mm-hmm. The majority of the board feels we're willing to, and have been willing to, put the time, energy into getting to that, quote, plan to bring to the public. I think where the two boards are, the majority of the boards, is really the better way to say it, are having problems is there's some specifics within the plan of, do we do wards, do we do, the implementation of what this plan looks like.
Right.
And some of those things have not been flushed out amongst the board themselves. And then for us to, A, either go to the public to say this is what it is, or B, say to the public, what do you want? So, it's a two-level of the questions. The board per se is not the problem in terms of trying to get there. It's what do we decide on to get there, and I think some of the ingredients of the plan have not been defined by the two boards because we've never been able to get to the point of actually sitting down with experts on our side helping us. So to say we want to talk about wards, pros and cons. We want to talk about a highway, an appointed or elected, pros and cons. We want to talk about, so that's where we need to get is not whether or not we're going to do this plan.
Right.
It's whether what the ingredients of the plan look like, and then when we get done with this pie that we're baking is good enough for us to bring to the public for them to vote on.
But you're not starting from scratch.
No, and thank you for
40 years.
asking that question.
But we are starting from scratch. Nobody's done this before.
Yeah,
So we are starting from scratch.
We are starting from scratch because we don't have any numbers that are solid enough to base a decision. And that's part of it. Financial numbers or the even any of the decisions that you've heard tonight about the form of the governance about even whether we should put it on the ballot, though that's a minority position here. There's not a strong foundation that you're walking into.
But I do want to say, there are 4 board members and village board members who support offering. My own personal opinion is that this is something the voters have the right to decide. It is not something these two boards have any right to decide except to come up with the best referendum question it can put before the voters. And there are 4 town board members who support it. And there is opposition in minority.
Right.
Okay, so we've basically gotten to question number 1. Question number 2 pretty much addresses the same thing. We really need to understand what we can mingle and not jeopardize our eligibility for the Citizen Empowerment Act money. And also there is quite a lot of controversy in our town about how secure that money is.
But still only a grant that you have to apply for and receive.
Yes.
It just means you're eligible for applying.
Right, but we understand by right, but there's some worry that it won't be there every year. So that's something that, we've heard different opinions on. We've heard there's $35 million in a lockbox. That could only be used for this particular
But that's not part of the question.
So, okay. Would you be okay with us hiring a separate accounting firm to do the financial impact part of this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would just want to make sure that they're used to doing municipal accounting and not just regular.
And we would want to review their work.
Right.
Yes.
To make sure they're using the proper assumptions and there are certain, to make sure they're using proper assumptions and there are legal requirements with respect to finance issues to make sure that their work is in compliance with the legal requirements.
Okay. And obviously there's going to be a lot of discussion with the Comptroller's Office, the Governor's Office, back and forth. Do you have a good working relationship? Do you know, do you have an automatic dial?
Well, just about. Years ago, Jerry was the chairman of the municipal law section of the New York State Bar Association and met a lot of people. And for the past 2 years, I've been chairman of that section and have met and worked with a lot of people. So our involvement with the state regulatory authorities that deal with municipalities goes back a long time.
Okay.
You don't want to date me. I don't want to date you, but it goes back before.
Be polite.
Okay, so our 5th and final question was, how would you include the joint boards and our respective attorneys in the steps to referendum? We've talked a little bit about that in the beginning, but if you would like to expand on that based on what we told you.
Well, I think we'd have a series of work sessions And however you normally want to conduct those in a fashion like this is certainly fine. We'd have your consultants here if you wanted to have them here. It's helpful because then everybody is at the table and can ask their questions when the issues are raised. So we would encourage that. We would want to have an agenda for each meeting so that we knew what the legal issues were that were going to be addressed at that meeting, so that if it wasn't going to be me that was going to address it, it was better to have our municipal finance person, for example, here, be there to address that evening's questions. We could do that, and just so it would be organized properly, so that it'd be done efficiently, and that by the end of that evening session, you would have a comfort level as to what the choices were and what the ramifications of any particular direction would be.
And can I add something to that answer? As we went through the Fairweather report, I mean, he touched on a lot of things. So the first question would be, are all the issues identified? And if not, what additional issues should be identified? And then I think what you want to do is prioritize those and maybe group them because of the relationship of the subject matters. Like one might be all public officers, another one might be boards, another one might be operating departments, and do that toward the beginning and have identifying those issues that are going to be the topics of each of these sessions. Now, how many sessions will you have? Well, it depends. How many issues are you going to identify that you want dealt with, and how do you want to group them? Something may be so important that that's the only thing that's going to be discussed at that particular session. But you should have that in the beginning. You should have the roadmap done at the earliest possible time. And then everybody will know that the third meeting is going to deal with the issue of operating departments. Okay, and so somebody may be more interested in that than they're interested in whether or not there's an elected clerk or an appointed clerk. So I think the beginning is identify all the issues and then group them and then prioritize it and set up your agenda for going forward on a time frame based on that analysis. That would be...
do you think that we are going to have to go this 17A route?
Let me step back. You weren't here at the beginning when so I mean what was told to us by one of the people was that in order to do the townwide village concept under 17A, we actually have to go have home rule legislation created before we could even move forward, which was sort of a surprise to a lot of people who were on the original committee. So, A, are you familiar with that, and do you believe that to be the case?
Not if you're just going strictly as a village.
As a townwide village and operating as a village.
Right.
Okay,
if you
so
wanted
just
to
go
do
that
what you had
straight.
suggested earlier, though, in terms of picking and choosing among town law issues and village law issues,
Then you would have to.
then if you're creating a new hybrid, then you would need a home rule.
And I think maybe we confused ourselves, but I think that was very clear when it was stated that if we wanted to have that flexibility, the tightest and cleanest way to go would be with a home rule. If we're going a village town-wide straight village form of government, then that's another.
Well, what we were told from the beginning was if we're a town-wide village, we will have to hold one meeting a year as a town. And that under that circumstance, we would then be allowed to choose from column A and column B. I'm seeing three very skeptical faces.
I'm not aware of
That's
that.
not on the questions, and we didn't ask anybody else.
I want to ask that. I want that question to be out
I'm
there
not
so
aware
people
of
are
that.
thinking about
I
that.
think the new legislation is pretty clear that if you're going to do it as a village, you function as a village.
Okay. Finally, you
And
gave
one other
us...
comment, though, there. Under the municipal home rule law, so now you're a village.
Yeah.
Under the home rule law, it's by local law, sometimes subject to referendum. Your form of government is very flexible. You control your own, and manage your own affairs of government, even under the current statute, prior to 17A. So if you want to tweak the requirements of the state village law, being a village, those options are available to you by local law, and again, usually subject to either mandatory or permissive referendum.
So what you're saying, Ben, is
you could do
that you
that
would form as a village and then, as a
And then
village.
make a change. Okay.
Well, you got two options there. One, you can form as a village and tweak later, or those tweaks could be part of the agreement that you submit to the referendum.
I'm going to ask a quick question, but then we'll wrap up with...
Right, well, we also do need, you gave us hourly fees.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, and we do want to give you some time to maybe think about if there were a flat fee?
A flat fee. We've
Flat
gotten
rate.
some flat
Flat
fees,
rate.
we've gotten some hourly rates. So the question is if we wanted to try to,
How about not to exceed,
Yeah.
hourly not to exceed?
and is that feasible?
Yes.
And would you...
Or could you go the other way? We think the
Flat
project is going to cost X amount, and anything in excess will be at an hourly rate.
I think we want to go with the
I was going to say
first.
not to exceed. Sally, Sally.
Take the lawyer's advice.
It's one way of going.
Okay.
Let's be honest.
You're being very fair.
I have a bad reputation for that. Yes.
Well, we all want to be fair, but you were the ones who said not to exceed, so why are you giving them another option?
I like not to exceed, please.
We would,
So you would be prepared to give us that?
yes, we would.
Okay, thank you.
It's all right.
Okay, so...
Sally, don't ask any more questions.
I have one more.
Okay, I'll be good.
I do have one question that's not on the list, but it's out of this whole conversation, but does anybody have any other questions?
No, go for it.
Okay, I mean, I guess I just want to ask because, at least for me, at this point, we've been working on a townwide village, but, there's benefits to town government, there's benefits to village government, or maybe there really isn't. So I guess, in a way, what I really sort of want to understand is there more benefits to town government, village government? Is it okay to just do a village government? It's not fair for you to completely answer it, but I guess in a way, because we're being told tonight, in some ways for some of us, okay, the thought of being able to possibly, if there's real benefits in town and other benefits in village, and the fact that we could take the best from both and create a more equitable model type government that we would like to bring forward to the voters, which might have to be via the home rule route, that's a harder, that's adding another level of stuff we have to do. It might be worth it because of the ultimate government we present to the voters, but it might not be worth it because the benefit of, in town legislation might not be that great that it's worth it to more from the village government, and the tweaks we need to make, we could do if we are a townwide village government. So I guess I sort of want to understand really as we figure out where we're going.
I can answer that just from a personal perspective. I've always thought that villages have more flexibility than towns. And for example, the village mayor has more executive authority than a town supervisor does.
Which could be good or bad, but go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. But just in terms of running your community, there are exceptions in certain communities.
Counterpoint here.
Right. Well, there's an example of
Okay, answer the question and forget the sidebars.
No, because the sidebar is, go ahead.
I've always felt that village government gives you much more flexibility. It's easier to change. You just have, I believe, more flexibility to meet the current and future needs of the community.
And you?
Just one other comment about villages. Villages don't have special districts per se, the way towns do.
That's right.
But villages can establish local improvement areas, which really operate the same way as a district does. And you can have a local improvement area for many different types of purposes that aren't available with the town special district, for instance. So that's another example
We
of
call them benefit
flexibility.
assessment districts.
It's the same sort of thing.
Yes, but in the county, there's only certain limited ones that you can have.
Right.
Whereas in the village, it's broader.
And Jerry? Do you have
I don't disagree with anything either.
That's why you're the boss, and they all like working for you, right?
Well, they both gave me the straight story. So.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions, or? Okay, great, I thank you both. So I have one more question, actually. Jerry, since you showed up tonight, does that mean if you guys should get the job, that you'll be very involved in this?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. We typically work as a team. And that's why I said sometimes you may have something on your agenda that one of us, somebody that might not even be here tonight, is the most appropriate person to be there, to be able to provide you the guidance that you need on that discrete issue.
Okay. Thank you guys very much for coming. Thank you.
Awfully nice to see you again, Ben. Awfully nice to meet you, Alex.
Nice to see you. You were working on the Cold War Museum, right, weren't you?
Thank you.
You did the...
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Again.
Thank you.
Good question. You're the keeper of the questions? Is that
No, Sally did the
The nicest thing I've been called today.
No, I was doing it and got tired.
Oh, you got tired?
So she got to be the keeper.
Okay.
Good night, folks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have O'Connor and Davis.
But we don't have any fixed questions for that.
No, not per se. And so I don't have the names of who are here. I knew everybody else, but what?
Mr. Kennedy?
Mike is working.
Right, okay.
I recognize him.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy and...
Chris Koff.
Chris Koff.
Great, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Supervisor.
So actually, you are the only ones that we actually don't have questions per se prepared, because it's a little out of the context of what we needed to ask the legal. So why don't we allow you to just talk to us first, and then we'll see who has anything to add.
Everybody has your...
Right.
Terrific. Well, again, my name is Tom Kennedy. I'm a partner in the firm O'Connor Davies. About 3 years ago, I opened our firm's 7th office located in New Windsor. We're about 7 offices. We're 7 offices with 400 employees and 70 partners. About a third of our practice is dedicated to municipal audit and tax and consulting work. I'd like Chris Koff introduce himself as well.
Yeah, my name is Chris Koff. I'm also a partner with O'Connor Davies. I joined the firm about 2.5 years ago, and prior to that, I spent 30 years on your side of the table as a Commissioner of Finance for Rockland County.
So O'Connor Davies, I mentioned, we're about a third of our practice is devoted to governmental. So, for instance, some of those type of services that we perform include audits, and I'm happy to be the auditor for the village of New Paltz as well. And frankly, when we assembled the team for this, Sally had reached out to me, Trustee Rhodes.
I just need to ask you to talk into bring the microphone.
Thank you. We were asked to propose, and I thought it'd be valuable to use our knowledge, but I wouldn't lead the team because we haven't had the opportunity to work with the town, but we don't want you to feel that we'd be slanted towards the village, although we are because it's our client. Anyway, so what I had done is assembled the team so that Chris would lead the team, but you'd be able to use our experience from what we know with the town, with the village. So having said that, some of the types of engagements that we've been involved with, not necessarily in consolidation, but for instance, Chris Koff recently performed the consulting engagement hired by the legislature of Ulster County to review their budget. So these are the type of services that the firm provides. We do the same work for Dutchess County, for Ulster, I mentioned Ulster, but we also do it for Orange and Westchester. I recently did a study in Westchester regarding the privatization of Department of Labs and Research down there. And accordingly, I'm not allowed in Westchester anymore. But having said that, that's a little bit of the type of experience that we have in municipal accounting. So if there's any questions that we can...
In regards to the Citizen Empowerment Act, are you familiar with that?
Maybe you have a...
Yeah, I mean, I've...
Just if you were at the microphone.
Yeah, I've read it because we had a proposal with the town of Rye and the village of Portchester and the village of They're part of the Village of Mamaroneck. Also wanted to consider the consolidation, so we read through it with a legal team. So I've read bits and pieces of it as far as the accounting goes and the impact it would have on the financial nature. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't read the law section.
Well, no, that's okay. I mean, because I'm just asking from the perspective of and without being an expert myself in it, but within the citizen empowerment, there's specific things that we have to answers that we have to come to, and so there's a specific financial aspect that you have to come up with, in a sense. So, I mean, reading that and understanding the work that that's ahead of you in order to comply with that, you feel comfortable, you understand it?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, you've heard it from the prior two firms that I've listened to, is that it depends on the involvement that this board takes. It's going to be the interpretation of your contracts with your employees, which contracts are going to be in place as you're looking to calculate either the cost savings or the cost of. You're going to have to look at your contracts, your fringe benefits, your post-employment benefits, what policies you've had. There's been plenty of cases that we've looked at where there's been mergers of police departments, where they've had different union contracts, different buyouts for their retirement. And you have to make sure you account for all that, and sometimes it's a cost. I mean, there's not always a savings involved when you merge different union contracts or different employment contracts. So you have to look at each one, and the board has to be very firm telling us which one is going to take precedent. Are you going to go contract A, pay scale A, or pay scale B? You have to look at your bonds. You have to see what was backing each bond. You have to see if the assets behind them are going to be able to be shared, and the bond is over the same taxpayer base. Again, your municipal lawyer gets involved with that, and you have to see if you have to refund or if the bond holds. The current bond structure holds. The other item is the revenue streams. You have to look if you get mortgage tax. If the town receives mortgage tax, the village receives mortgage tax. Now you have to see if you do need to modify your home rule request to include both, because it'll be one unified mortgage tax. We have a coterminous town and village in Scarsdale, where the town collects the mortgage tax, and the only purpose the town serves is to collect the mortgage tax and sales tax and then distribute it to the village. And they have two different year ends, but we have to report them in one financial because they have one revenue stream, but it's broken up into the two components. So I have to look at all these little things.
I'm right. You do financial work for Scarsdale.
Yes.
Okay.
We're the auditors for Scarsdale.
And they are the form of government that we want to be.
They are coterminous town village, yes.
Right. And so you have experience in where we want to go from where we are.
Yes.
Okay.
Does the village collect mortgage tax?
No.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
That's what I like.
Yes, they do.
The village?
The village does not collect sales tax, but they most certainly do get mortgage tax. Yes.
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 Okay.
Now,
And the town does not get
No, we
gross
could collect
utility
sales tax. We
taxes.
just choose not to.
Pardon?
We could collect sales tax. We'd get the village portion of the town's sales tax from the town. Instead it goes to the town for everyone.
Yes, yes, it does. Yes, there was something I wanted to say.
So why don't you please go ahead and say it?
Okay, so the first night that we were looking at the proposal, what it said in the proposal is that you're willing to meet with the steering committee. And so my question is, since you guys were sitting back there for a while, have you come to realize that this is the steering committee? And your meetings will not be like with a small group of 4 in the daytime. It will be with all 10 of us at night. And potentially a lot of them. I just want to know.
Yes.
You gotta be real.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to make sure.
Almost all our municipal board meetings are held at night.
Right. Well, because I had asked at the time, because this original steering committee was much smaller. Thank you.
Okay, so are you clear on this?
I'm clear on that question, yeah.
Oh, good. It was a major one.
What's a major one?
Here.
For Jean.
Oh, for Jean.
That was for me.
Do anybody else have any other questions? Stuart?
As you would, I don't know if this is on. Is this on?
Works great.
As you would imagine, in interviewing several sets of attorneys this evening, when they got to the financial part, they frequently said that the way they would analyze the finances to go in toward coming up with the agreement to put before the referendum is different kind of work than accountants usually do in dealing with municipal and other audits. Would you comment on that?
I guess I'll go first on that. Yeah, I would absolutely agree, because generally the types of services that independent accountants perform are generally attest in nature. So what that means is that we issue an opinion as to the presentation of your financial statements. What is unique about doing this is similar to the type of work we've done in consulting engagements for instance, the County of Ulster, where we don't issue an opinion that the debt service budget reserve should be, or budget should be reduced. What we're actually saying is, based on the information here, this is what we project your cost will be for that. And this is so we're making recommendations on certain budget items in that type of work, which is consistent with, I believe, this type of engagement.
And that would also be what you spoke of earlier, contracts and compatibility of contracts, bond issues, assets, all of those kinds of things.
I think a better example of a client, because you've asked each of the people prior to us, our relationship with the state controller or the Attorney General's office. One of the clients that we do handle, and I'm also part of that team, is the City of Yonkers. And I think everybody knows the City of Yonkers had a control board, and their budget has to be approved by New York State Controller's office. And we're intimately involved in that process. We have to process all the paperwork and get it up to the State Controller and have their stamp of approval on everything that we've projected in that budget, including all the supporting documentation for the numbers that are contained in the budget. So we analyze their union contracts. They have fire, they have police, they have an ambulance associated with the police emergency services, and they look at all that work. So we have contacts in the State Controller's office through that budget process.
Now, I know this is a bad time of year to ask this question since we're coming up to tax time, but you had said in your proposal, given the parameters that we defined in terms of our requests for proposals, that you believe you could complete your work by July 3rd to the middle. Is that still true?
Yes.
Okay.
So, again, I think it goes back to what I think everybody has said. It depends on the involvement of the board in helping us determine the decision, because once you say contract A takes precedence, we can then go in and see what the costs associated with that are, or savings.
And I'd like to just follow up with that statement. I mean, do we, as the boards, have the ability to say we're going to go with this contract versus that contract, or is that something that we really actually have to negotiate with the unions or with the state? I mean, it's not as simple as us just saying, okay, we're going to get rid of this union and we're going to all become that union. I mean, isn't there more to
and that's what that's what the lawyers would handle for you.
Right.
As part of their role would be determine what contracts takes precedence in each situation.
So are you saying that those contracts have to be revised prior to going to referendum?
I would say no. I would say that for you to do your cost proposal to show your savings or the cost of, you would have to make your best guess and put that in your proposal. All the contract can be negotiated. And again, we're not lawyers, but I would assume that'll be an ongoing part of this process, because not everybody is going to be happy, because 75 to 80% of the costs associated with running a government are personnel and fringe benefit related. So if there's going to be a savings, unfortunately it'll fall in the background.
But will your report show us, if we go with option A, we can anticipate this kind of expenditure, and if we go with Union B, I mean,
yes.
That's what you will be providing us.
Right, that's what we'd be evaluating.
Let's not go the wrong place. We don't have any decision as to what union is decided.
It's a hypothetical.
Okay.
Right. Right.
Well, no.
We have, the village has CSEA, and the town has?
We have Teamsters, UPSU, and then we have the PBA.
So
So our PBA is separate, but we've got UPSU and Teamsters, and they've got, well, it does in the sense, that's why I said take out the police.
Right.
But for the people who work within town hall, we have UPSU, and then for our highway building grounds, we have Teamsters, and the village for their
Only has
DPW
CSEA.
and their municipal workers, it's all CSEA. So it is 3 unions that would have to be merged into one potential union, and how that happens, I don't think it's as simple as, at least I thought, it's not as simple as you guys looking at the contract and saying you want to use this contract, right?
No.
No.
I'm saying the lawyers be working, that's part of their job.
But do we have to have that decision made prior to going to referendum?
No.
No.
We already discussed that.
No.
I'm sorry, I missed it. So,
No, I don't believe you do. I mean, you're going to go with a proposal. It's not, nothing is ever hard
so the
and fast.
proposed referendum would presume...
Make certain assumptions.
Okay.
And that's what you'll put forth, and hopefully you can meet as many of those assumptions as you put forth as the final product morphs into your operation.
Go ahead, Kitty.
So $50,000 of these costs is reimbursable by the state?
As I believe it, yes.
Okay, and your proposal alone goes up to $40,000. And I'm not sure how much our separate boards have allocated.
Well, we allocated $35,000 in our budget for the B fund in our 2013 budget.
Right, but I'm not...
We're in the middle of our budget our public hearing is on April 10th.
Okay, so do you have a proposed amount for
Yes,
this?
we do.
And that is?
$35,000.
Okay, all right, so we have up to $70,000 to spend.
And you're writing the grant.
Excuse me?
You heard me.
The board had actually authorized, I said that I would try to, do the grant, but it was, but I'm waiting.
Ken Bond said that.
Well, Ken Bond had said they could draft it in a heartbeat, and so part of the reason I'm not doing anything right now is I'm waiting to see what we're going to do before.
Okay.
Well,
But
first of all,
my
I'm not going to
heart
waste my time doing
doesn't
anything.
believe that beat.
Okay, we need to go back to all of
I didn't say I could do it in a heartbeat, Sally.
It took you and I a week to do a
No,
little
I
one.
understand that, but that's something for discussion.
Do you have any questions of us?
I actually had one more question before you ask questions of us. When you have to do the citizen empowerment financial work, again, not being an expert at it and everything, but is some of it judgmental in terms of, some of them are fixed costs and all that kind of stuff, but you're also, I think, putting together a potential budget for this new government, or you're just, in terms of trying to understand exactly what you have to do, I want to sort of understand how much of it is just real stuff and how much is sort of judgment on your part.
It's very, I think it's very, very
Citizen
simple.
Empowerment Act, I don't have that.
I mean, they're going to examine assets and liabilities, and they're going to say what assets can be combined, what liabilities stay with the town, stay with the village, can be paid by, we hope, the combined government. They're going to look at bonding, and they're going to say, okay, you're bonded for this, and that is the responsibility of the village until such bond is paid off. That's the responsibility of the town. Any bonding that goes on by the two governments before final one government is the burden of both. And they'll go through all of that, and they'll look at costs, and they'll look at savings, and they'll say, okay, the town has 5 snow plows and the village has 4 snow plows, and you're only really, that's 9 snow plows, and based on this computation that Chris and Blue have worked out, you only need 4, so you're going to sell 5. Okay, and that's the kind of stuff they do.
But that's information.
Guys?
I think we'll take a little closer.
You want to adopt that?
Now, if we want them to do more, that's a different question.
No. But I mean, in other words, that's them looking at, it doesn't matter.
We have a very specific approach that we put on page 6 of the presentation. So, Chris kind of alluded to what that approach is, and it included a lot of what Sally just mentioned.
So do you have questions for us while I look at page 6?
Now, if we, because I'm going to take what...
Well, no, okay, but see... Okay,
let me just ask, because I'm going to take it a little further. If we say, wanted to look at not just what the Empowerment Act requires financially for the referendum, but say we wanted to look at efficiencies, would it be possible to hire you separate and apart from, or an add-on to this, to look at the two governments and say, you could run much more efficiently with 2 people, or you need 2 more people in this area and you don't need them over there? Is that possible to do, Chris?
Separate study.
That, I mean, that's a real efficiency
Human
study.
resources, overall, all of our human resources? That's a big study,
well
beyond the scope of this.
But the question is, Ken.
Well, that's why, I want to go back to number 1, which was... But that's why I want to go back to number 1, which was asking the question of, number 1 is a fiscal estimate of the town cost and savings which may be realized from consolidation of the village and the town of New Paltz. And so, which may be realized from consolidation, some of that realization is decisions that the board makes that are subjective, because these 10 people have a majority that agree that we want to see savings in X, Y, and Z way. But that's subjective of the board giving that information to you.
Correct.
Versus you coming back to us and saying you could save money if you do this or that.
Well, but it would still be inclusive in that analysis,
I understand
correct?
it, but I want to know how much are they going to be saying to us, if you do this, you could save, or if it's all coming from us for you to reflect the savings that we believe. That's what I want to...
I'm going to answer you in a different way.
You can
okay?
Feel free.
I don't think it's either way of what you said. I think it's going to be us looking at your current budget, your current structure, and as we go through a department, and again, I'll pick an easy one if they both have highway departments. We'll stick with that. Well, is there going to be a need for 2 superintendents of highways and 2 deputies and 2 supervisors? We're not going to come to you and recommend that you unilaterally fire 3 out of the 6. What we're going to come to and say is that you tell us what structure you'd like. You have 2 superintendents now. What do you want to look at? Do you want to, is one near retirement? Do you want to let one phase out? Do you want to, that's why I said it's a lot of involvement on your part. I mean, because it would be very easy for us, and I can tell you from sitting on your side of the table, we used to get these consulting reports back, and you say, oh, you can save $2 million. But if the entity is not willing to cut loose those people, you're not going to save $2 million. So it has to be a give and take on both sides. As we look at the budget and we start looking at positions and titles and say, okay, you have a clerk's office here, and when you put all the clerk's staff together, you got 12 people. Do you really think you need 12 people? Or you have 3 are nearing retirement age. Do you want to, through attrition, have that savings? There's a big give and take. I mean, the numbers, you can make them look however you want, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the most accurate data on the table. So that's why I said it's your involvement.
I would also just add that we're going to formulate a lot of our own thoughts on these things too, and share those with you as well.
Okay. I have one more question. Does anybody else have any other questions? Nobody? Okay, this is somewhat of a sensitive question, but it's got to be asked because, like you did state, you represent the village government.
Yes.
The village government has an executive form of government, which means that, there's a strong mayor, versus a town board where it's 5 people. I think I'm not saying anything out of hand in a sense, but is it going to put you in a difficult position trying to serve these 10 people to bring forward something on behalf of the 2 boards, and maybe the mayor doesn't agree with maybe the direction the majority of the board is going?
You accuse me of putting pressure on our consultants?
No, I'm not accusing you of anything, Jason. I'm just saying you have a lot of authority.
Exactly like
no, you have a lot of authority as a village mayor, okay, to choose to act whatever way you would like to choose to act.
In which way? And how,
I just want to know, that's why I want to understand it. From their perspective, if they're being put in a difficult position, being the clients of, if they were the clients of the town, it would be very different because I don't have the power that you have. Okay, so all I'm just saying is that because they represent they are your client. They're the village board's client, but they're also your client. You have more direct access with them. Is there anything that we need to be talking about right now that makes us have to sit back and say, is this relationship going to work? And I have to ask that question. I'm sorry.
No, Jason, I think you're completely misinterpreting it. I think what Susan's saying is she doesn't want O'Connor Davies to feel compromised, okay, in their relationship as the auditors for the Village of New Paltz.
Well,
I think.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Simply put, the answer is no.
Right.
And frankly, in recognition that somebody might wonder that, that's why I kind of stepped back from the process and brought Chris into the fold, and why Chris will lead the team. I'm assisting Chris with my knowledge of the village, and Leslie Tillotson, who's the engagement manager, will also be assisting Chris. And so this way you realize the benefits of having that relationship already, and you don't have to relearn the village's finances. So again,
which is
simply
to the benefit of all of us.
Right.
The answer is.
And I have to say that being so well acquainted with the village's finances, I was surprised at the high end of your estimate, since it does seem like you are already pretty familiar with half of this equation.
But they aren't familiar with your
But they are
So
familiar.
that's an interesting. So how are you going to come into the town and familiarize yourselves with this end of the aspect? I'm just curious. And
I think it starts with a review of your budget, to sit down and talk to you about your budget, to go through what departments you have, to get a personnel roster. Again, you're looking at a consolidation and the efficiencies. So I don't have to be that familiar with your audit report or your ending numbers. We're going on a more going forward basis. So it's not as much looking into the past, it's more looking into the future where you want to be. So it would start with your budgets, it would start with your personnel, and a lot of it would be through interviews with you and people here to get a flavor for, again, what you're attempting to do, and honestly working very closely with your attorneys. Whoever you pick as the legal is going to really drive a lot of the directions we go, because you heard them talk about your bonding and your what contracts again, and what's legal, what's not legal, whether it be a town structure or village structure, you have boards, all that, the costing will come after the fact, not simultaneously. So I mean, we'll always be lagging slightly behind some of the legal questions. We're there then to say they gave you, like you said, Route A, Route B, we cost them out. And we see where you're headed financially. So we're always probably stage 2 involved as stage 1 because we need to hear it, but our work will come after you start making certain decisions and you know, have ideas.
So this will actually be the third study of consolidation we've done in the last 2 years. We have a Fairweather study. There was a volunteer study done by most people, disabled volunteers in the community. Still, there's no answer about whether, I don't know why we're doing a third, frankly, to be honest, personally. We haven't found a good reason to consolidate yet, but we'll keep looking. One of the overriding premises of the prior versions, prior iterations of this study has been an emphasis, for various reasons, on not firing staff, on finding, I believe it was, I think the Finance Committee, one of the premises early on was the premise of no staff reductions, unless very obvious, and that didn't apply obviously to HR, because it would be meaningless to have an HR committee that didn't look at personnel. But if there were similar, since it has come up before, if there were a similar constraint that we're looking at the benefits of consolidation absent staff cuts, is that something that you can do, and what would that do to the price, and what would that do to the project in your mind? Since you said about 20 minutes ago, I think that 75 to 80% of any savings in these scenarios come from staff reductions, assuming you find overlap, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, so just to toss that out there, what would that do in your mind to the process?
I don't think it would change the process too much. I think it would change the financial results. You'd have to look at then, if it's not going to be fiscal savings, is it going to be able to do more things for your constituents that you haven't been able to do now, because now you've combined some services, you might be able to offer more services, you might be able to get into different areas. Again, it's staff.
So still significant work to be done, still significant possible savings, even if we're not So it doesn't kind of make it so anemic that it's not worth pursuing. It's still worth looking at, you think, even with just that 25-30%. Again, this is
that's a tough one to answer. I mean,
but I think the bottom line, Jason.
And I'm sorry, I'm not done talking, Sally. The final thing is just to make sure that this. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else, and I think it's unlikely that condition would be here because if we've got professionals of your caliber here, now's the time to look at that. As terrified as people are going to get with that conversation, but it's just something that we've had problems dealing delicately with in the past. So if it does. Since it has come up before, if that condition were in place, I wanted to know how that would impact things, but I think it's unlikely. Sorry, Sally, if that doesn't answer your question.
But the assumption is, and always has been, Jason, the decision is ours. They can make recommendations to us. If you do X, you will save. If you do Y, you'll have a lesser saving. If you want to have a greater savings, guess what? You have to do. But that's this board, these boards.
Absolutely, but since the board has made 2 different decisions on that issue, I figured put both scenarios in front of the consultant, that's all.
Well, but all studies have been questioned and put into doubt, which is why we need the outside consultant. So I'd prefer to go with them.
What I will say is that, yes, back to what you said at the very beginning, that as some of the committees did some of the work, I can only speak for the Finance Committee, but a lot of that thought process, like we know so-and-so is going to be retiring next year, so we don't need that position, and the village has, does it a certain way, so we don't have to replace that person, so we could take that as savings because we know that person's retiring. We know, so-and-so is retiring, so how do we have to replace that person, or could we basically see that as a savings because somebody in the village, picks that up conversely from the village, that they do certain work, but that the town has the equipment or the expertise, so when that person from the village retires, so in terms of giving you that direction that you're saying, a lot of that has been discussed relative to us going forward, with us sort of knowing or identifying where we believe, at least just as the representatives who did that work, we took all those kind of things into question. And then there were some particular, departments where we might have said, you got to bite the bullet because you just don't need that many people. And,
right.
It is what it is, and then that's a decision the boards make. Do you duplicate the work or do you sort of bite the bullet, and that's something we'll face as we go forward. Stuart?
Just on that issue, I think there's a difference between saying that we're going to put the 2 budgets together and never change personnel policies ever, or saying we're never going to fire anybody, but if there's a more efficient way to do it as we move into the future, and statistics show that 8% or whatever people retire or leave the government for one reason or another, then over a fairly reasonable time, if it's more efficient to do it another way, you can do that without doing away with anybody in particular.
Yeah,
so
attrition works.
I think that's another way of looking at it, other than just say, well, nobody's ever going to be fired because we're going to keep all these positions forever. There's 2 different ways, and both of those ways will save all the employees that we presently have.
Well, I can say just from the town perspective, I can't say what the village has been saying, is we've said from a town perspective, we've already made certain efficiencies on a town level that we believe work for the town, but with the understanding that we might potentially be moving forward with a potential merger, and so we've made certain things going forward, which might have to be undone if we don't go forward, but that's the future. But we know from a town perspective, we might have an older workforce than the village has, and so when we look at putting together certain departments, we sort of can see the savings because we believe we've got enough people to do some of the work, and we believe that, through attrition, some people will leave, but that's something we have to go through the process, right. And you might be able to say, well, no really understanding, how many roads you have in this and that, this is what you really do need to deliver the services, and you don't want to go below that, and hopefully you would help us to get to that understanding.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. Good. Anybody have any other questions?
So nice to meet you both.
Thank you very much for both of you coming.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
It was nice meeting you.
Thank you.
See you when you
Thanks for coming.
Night, Tom.
Do we have any rebuttal witnesses?
Oh, thank you. It was nice to meet you.
Tom, so nice to meet
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I suggest a 10-minute break.
Oh, you can see
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
I suggest a 10-minute break, and I think we'll go to executive session and discuss.
Can I
Does
have a
everybody
motion to
agree?
adjourn?
Yes, I'm gonna.
I'll do it.
A 10-minute break and then executive session to discuss
Well,
this?
we have some other items
Oh,
to the
yeah, well,
agenda.
I want executive session to discuss the people. That was the purpose.
Well, so then you can.
We can come out and do that. We can come out and do that later.
It's on the agenda, so, I mean, you'll have to make the motion to go into executive.
I'm going to.
But I think we need to.
But we agreed this was the priority
After bad. That
tonight.
looks like a bad.
And we can add that.
You keep making a bad decision over and over again. Yeah. I couldn't figure out,
I mean,
what that was.
people who are still gonna submit prices.
Right, like Memorial Park.
Well, I think it's only fair, we did ask.
I don't think they know enough.
It's all on camera. Oh, no, it wouldn't pass my vote. They'll stay here till they,
Well, you know, Ken Boggs, I'm just reading a note from him saying you have to choose which town laws you're gonna want and which village laws you're gonna want. I have a memo from him December 1st.
No.
So he,
all
I
right,
know,
what Matt said.
I know.
Take a break.
So I'm not sure.
Oh, the audio's over?
Yeah.
I say we
I'll
agree.
move to adjourn.
I'm in the minority.
If there's a second to adjourn, then there's no discussion, you have a vote.
Really, you want me to bring it back up?
No, I'm just saying, if you had a second, then they have to vote, and there's no.
Yeah,
Say,
and it failed anyway, so you're lost.
Is the TV on or is it off?
Or you know, then go together. What? What was that? I know, I'm being sarcastic. It's gonna come to 45 minutes late and I'm pretty sure he's leaving. Yeah. You gotta just let it roll out. Tim tells me you guys, like the movie board, he's like, you're so jaded and desensitized to this because you're dealing with it so often that he's like, nobody in the professional world talks to people that way and sends emails like that. And I'm just like, what am I gonna do? I'm tired of fighting.
When I sent out the email on Saturday.
Oh, I know.
Friday,
Oh, God,
Friday,
I saw
and I
those.
got the email response, and I just, so I wrote back my response, which was, help me understand what I misunderstand.
I thought your response was great.
I'm trying to solve a problem, not create problems.
Yeah.
And then when I got his response, the email that I sent out, okay, which didn't go out, which I sent Saturday, but you guys didn't get till today for some strange reason. But I sent it, the response, which was, we will put this on the, because Kitty asked me to put it on the agenda. We'll put it on the agenda, which is the way we should be doing it, not via email, okay?
Yeah.
And I turned my phone off. I turned my phone off and said I will not
Right.
look at my phone
I've had things get
until
caught in my
Monday,
phone, yeah.
okay? I will not turn my phone off. I will not, I didn't even turn it off, but I will not look at it until Monday because I don't want to wait to see his response.
Yeah. No, I've gotten things get caught in like the outbox of your phone.
But my whole
Yeah.
point was just in a way, it was like saying, this is not a discussion to be having via email.
Right.
We'll be-
We'll talk about this
I was
in
asked to be put
public,
in, on the agenda, we'll talk about it in public.
Yeah.
Okay? And then I turned, and then it was like, okay, and then it was like, put the phone away and do not look at anything to do with the town, the whole, from Saturday on, because I'm not going, my weekends keep getting ruined.
Exactly. You need, well, that's the thing, in order to do this kind of stuff, and I have trouble doing that, like putting it aside and turning my mind off. But in order to do this, you have to be able to separate because the average person can leave their job at work. We cannot. And it's constant. So in order to do it, you have to compartmentalize. Otherwise,
But actually, if you're
insane.
But if you're dealing with people who are actually know how to deal with each other, you actually could do it, but it's not a problem.
Well, yeah, exactly.
When you're being slammed in the face.
But even then, though, you know, even without that, it's still, you
Yes,
know,
I know what you're saying.
it's still like intense, you know. You
But it's,
okay?
yeah, I know. But it's funny, because we put in a line where we all know he and his cronies believe, you know, that anybody who lives outside the town is so wealthy that they should basically subsidize the village. Because if you can afford to live in the town outside the village, you know.
There's a
You know what,
village
you know what,
like that.
actually, okay, first of all, yes, there's very, very, very wealthy people in the village,
Yeah.
okay? Who can
But, like,
afford to
Elthing
subsidize the
Ave
village,
has, like,
okay?
really nice houses. I mean, I don't know.
That
if
street,
it's
you're
very-
absolutely right.
I'm not
There's some
talking
beautiful
about
houses.
like, I'm not talking about wealthy people in general. I'm just talking about property values. There's
But you know,
definitely
it's
properties in the
simultaneous.
village
Don't
that
assume that just
are
because people have nice houses in the
assessed
village,
highly.
that they have the wealth that makes them able to afford those houses, you know, or that, you know, they're not losing those houses, or that, you know, that they don't have an income anymore to support those houses, you know. And the 75% value of the town is because the village, you know, has so much property off the tax rolls, okay? So that's why we're carrying the burden for the village. Just like all the institutions that Robert, you know, Kingston, where they always, you know, they always, I understand that, but there's, I'm just saying that there's some arrogance in terms of believing that those outside, the town outside the village.
requests for the agenda?
I do, but I am.
I wanted to have our executive session and discuss this first. I mean, that's what we agreed to. Tonight was supposed to be interviews
Yeah, and nothing else.
and nothing else.
I mean, I think I think it would do us well to set up a committee to deal
Oh,
with
I
this.
want to do that.
I think what your suggestion was it your suggestion?
Yeah.
I think that was great. And I was thinking that maybe we don't have somebody from the fire department on the committee if they don't want to, since they're all volunteers, and I don't want to like put more work on them, but we should get their input.
No, I think the two boards have to agree to policy first, and I think someone
Well, they
from
wanted to have the
police commission and the chief on the committee. And 2 people from the village and 2 people from the town.
You're not on, just, that's gotta be like that.
I don't want to be on.
You don't wanna be on?
I want to talk. Forget that.
Well, I think if we talk about this tonight, we should talk about it in a way where we just form
I
a
don't.
committee to deal with this.
I don't think it serves any useful purpose for us to fight. I think
Well, I
the
don't think
solution.
we're gonna fight
No,
as
no.
long as the mayor's not here.
No,
Didn't he just leave?
I think the solution, no, for the parades and that, is I think we need to put it in the committee for 2 people from the town, 2
Yeah,
people from the
that's what I'm
village,
saying.
just the way we handled Morial.
Well, and I'm saying that if we talk about it tonight, that's what we should talk about.
Mhm.
But I don't think the people sitting at this table right now, I don't think we'll fight about it.
I hope not.
I think only the mayor is up in arms. Everybody else thinks we need a solution. You know, there's no point in fighting. It's just about figuring out the best way to deal with it.
And we'll let the Morial School Committee talk about the other.
Yeah, I think that's true also. Yeah, I mean, well, we all know, you know, Jeff is dealing with family matters, and Stuart and Kevin and I have been in touch on these things.
But I don't think applicants should be staying here lobbying. I don't think lobbying should be going on. I think that's inappropriate.
Well, he left, they said
Hmm?
he was ready to leave and they said that's okay.
He stayed for every interview.
I think that's fine.
I do too, but I think then now it's time to go.
Right, well,
Can we get our crew together?
yeah, but I don't think he will.
Did Jason leave?
I think he left.
Oh,
You were outside with him, don't you know?
I thought he was coming back.
He was still out there smoking
Yeah.
when he came back in. He had his bag with him, I'm pretty sure he was in there.
Oh, okay. Where's Susan in her office?
I have no idea.
Hmm?
Yeah, she must be holding her hostage in the kitchen. Let's get them out of here. Because I know Kitty was going to get water, so.
You're gonna bond it anyway, you know, you're never gonna put enough in the fund. Okay, show $50,000 in the account. So who's left? These people who are here tonight, said to the village, it's gonna be a policy you voted to set.
Why it's so difficult. It's not difficult.
I know, I'm
Okay.
just giving you a heads up.
Yeah.
We ready to go?
Sure that he's calling.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, wait till,
Jason left.
Jason here?
I think Jason left.
Yeah.
He had his bag with him.
Go.
because he has to go write his blog.
I would like to make,
No, just a minute. Roseanne, Jason left.
What do you mean? The town tax carrier?
I would like-
Turn the heat on.
yeah,
I would like to put the motion for parades and events and Moriel Pool discussion on the agenda for the purposes of moving it to committee. And then I would like to move that we go into executive session for the purposes of discussing interviews.
Well, are those 2 motions or 1?
2 more.
I'm just
I'll
giving
second
order.
your first.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll second your second as well, but
Okay.
after we.
I'm just trying to give us an order.
Okay, well, I think for purposes of discussion, Sally's making a motion with a end result in that motion. And I think that there might be some.
Well, right, I would have to vote no on that motion. I think we can have a very quick discussion on Memorial Pool. I just don't know what final numbers you put in your budget.
Okay, but can we make a motion to put parades and Memorial Pool for discussion on the agenda now for us to discuss, and we'll see how we can have a effective and collegial discussion on this?
No, we don't have to discuss the discussion. The whole purpose of having this on the agenda is we just need to know what the final budget numbers are.
There's also the parades too.
We don't have final budget numbers.
For Moriello.
Okay, let's just put more, do I have a motion to put Moriello on the agenda?
Put both on.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to put Moriello and parades on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, no, it's a motion for, because it's being added.
Okay, second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion so carried. Okay,
So
Kim.
it's not on in the budget just yet because we are going through our budget process. So we have our public hearing coming up, but in our discussion items, we discussed putting money towards it. I could bring up the
15 capital.
It's on our list. I think
Okay, but there's
For capital.
two streams of revenue that we need. One is the capital improvements, and the other is how we're going to deal with the intentional operating loss of the pool every year. It's not really mismanagement, it's our subsidy of a municipal recreation facility. So Susan had sent you a letter with the estimated subsidy that it requires if we're going to keep the pool open from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And we just don't know whether or not you're going to be budgeting for any of that.
All right, there are two issues here that I see. Number one, I don't want a prolonged discussion on this because the purpose of tonight was to interview and then have an executive session to discuss the people that we interviewed. I would like to suggest that the Moriello pool issue of a subsidized loss be put into the committee that was formed last year to discuss Moriello, which was Kevin and Jeff from the town and Ariana and Stuart from the village, and that they talk about this and figure out what it is that perhaps is a solution. I also think we need a comptroller's opinion on this issue, which I will be happy to pursue. As far as parades and events, I think...
Wait, no, we're not on parades. So you think you need a comptroller's opinion about whether or not to contribute to the operational costs?
Yes, indeed. Because it is an A-fund expenditure.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. And I'll tell you why. Because she hasn't said no yet. She is willing to get a comptroller's opinion, which I think actually is a really good idea.
Thank you.
Because it is a fund. You know what? I think it's a great idea, and I'm sorry I didn't think of it.
But it doesn't have to be a fund. I mean,
it's true.
We could just
That
put our
is true.
share in the B fund.
But
or you could
for
turn over the pool and
year
let us run it.
2000.
Okay, that's what you've done.
But for
Sold.
I didn't.
Quiet.
Sally said you could turn it over to us and let us run it. Kim's making a motion.
You can't do
Kim's
that.
making a motion to let them do
Wait,
take over the
Sally
pool.
made a motion to turn over operation.
No, I did not. I made a motion to put it into committee. And that is the motion on the floor, and to seek a comptroller's opinion as to the legality of the village subsidizing the loss.
And that will.
In the meantime, can we come up with an agreement?
I mean, can you get an opinion in time for your budget?
No.
So
I can get an opinion probably by the end of the week.
So,
Want to bet?
hold on. Could you just rephrase that the subsidize is to subsidize the subsidy? The subsidy to the...
It's a lawyer.
My dear, the only way that I can entitle this is if you are asking the village to pay 50% more on an anticipated loss that is in the A fund, there's something very strange.
No,
That's
that's
why I
not-
want the comptroller's
No,
opinion.
wait, no, time out. 'cause she's-
Susan, would you just lay the facts out so that everybody's on the same page?
Well, I was just about to.
I had a motion on the,
No, but it's about, no, but you're putting out misinformation because the board was not asking the village board to subsidize 50% of the loss over and above what you already subsidized through the A fund. So what the town was asking was that, for the moment, the two boards, the majority, have agreed that instead of raising the rates to Moriello Pool in order to make it break even, have chosen to subsidize it to a loss of $60,000 in order to make it competitive with the county pool and have people be able to afford to go there. So that's a policy decision that we could change at any moment. But right now, the two boards are saying that we are subsidizing a $60,000 loss. So if you take the A fund portion, and then you take out the 25% that you guys pay, we're asking you to pay 15% of that.
15,000.
Right, $15,000, which is 25% of the 50% of the village's share of the loss. So if you take the 60,000, you put it into 30,000 to you, 30,000 to us, you take your 25% that you have from the A fund, that leaves you like 12,000, 14,000, whatever it is, to basically subsidize your portion of the loss that's not a part
that
of the
is
A
not what
fund.
your letter says, and that is not what Kitty's memo says. It says that we are asking the village to include in their upcoming budget $23,990 for Moriello Pool.
Wait.
Whatever the math, that's the, whatever, how the math works out.
Can we just have a discussion on this so that we know what the facts are? That's one fact, okay? And there are two other components here that we need to discuss and come to an agreement on. The other is that Bill Russell has determined that we need about $17,000 to $18,000 worth of pool repairs done.
That's in our budget now.
Very good.
That's done.
And then the other part of it is some other capital improvements that Chris Marks brought to our attention about 4 or 5 weeks ago, correct, Chris? Which involves taking certain improvements out of a pit and putting them in a different location to comply with different labor standards for
Labor and ESH.
okay, for whoever's going to be working on those systems, correct? And
Our understanding, Kevin, is that capital improvements, the pool, the ADA, the pad that Chris was talking about, moving the filtering system, all of that is $60,000. We have budgeted 30 in capital improvements for that. We have 15, we put 15 in.
So just to qualify that a little bit, Sally, so you've already addressed the issue that Chris raised.
The capital.
You've already addressed the issue of the sliding board and all those other things that we need done. And there's only one issue that needs to be addressed, and that's the one we're talking about.
Okay.
And everything else is resolved.
Okay, and let me
That's
just,
what I said.
and let me just read, it's, the pool is projected to operate at a $64,750 loss. This loss is split between the town and the village. If split between the town and village, would be $32,375 for each entity. The village share of the A fund loss of the pool is $8,385, which is 25.9% of your A fund share, leaving the remaining balance $23,990. So that's saying that we operate the pool together, we own it 50-50, we made a choice to operate it at a loss. If we split the loss and we take out your A fund portion, which we understand you pay, your remaining portion would be $23,990. That's how the formula was calculated.
That is what I'm saying.
I don't think that math works.
In my motion,
I think that it's wrong to the detriment of the village by a few $1,000s. I think the math
whatever the number is, we
What
can
is the
figure out the
number we
number.
started with?
Even
We
if
start with
it's
60.
64 divided by 4, right?
Yeah.
That's 16,
Right,
correct?
By 4?
yeah.
Okay.
So if 16 represents 25%, and if they're paying that 25% already, then the balance due is just 16, not 23.
Right,
That's what I'm saying.
right.
but the fact remains, it is worthy of a comptroller's opinion on this particular question, and my motion was to do both. Get a comptroller's opinion and put this question into the pool committee that has already been formed to determine.
There's just one question before the committee, and that just deals with the subsidies. The other two issues are resolved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly what you
So,
said.
Sally, I would just like you.
With that?
Well,
So Sally, would you agree to show your question to Kevin before you send it up to the controller's office? Because
No, I
the
will
question,
not.
right, I mean, the question that you just phrased right here is it legal for us to subsidize a failed, losing, mismanaged?
The question is it appropriate for the village to contribute an additional amount of money to offset the total cost of the pool, which is shared equally by village and town residents?
And owned equally?
Yes.
No,
I
it
was
is not.
If we're
It
gonna
is
do-
owned
if we're gonna,
equally.
it is, it's 50%, 50%.
Okay.
We just choose, well, I don't know why we operate.
That's right. You choose, the
No, we
town
don't
chooses
we
to
don't choose
operate.
to operate.
We
We
don't.
can't operate
We
it.
don't
Get out.
we do not
Okay.
have a contract in effect right now.
Motion to
So,
adjourn?
No.
I have a motion.
okay, but Sally, if you're not willing to share the letter
I
that
would
you're going
let
to send to
Kevin
the
write it.
controller with the town before you send it, then,
I'm willing to share the letter that the village received from the town regarding
no,
this matter.
that is not the,
That's what you asked for.
no, it is not, Sally. You
Sally,
did not ask
I
that you
think the
send.
original recommendation is correct. We'll handle this within the pool committee.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Okay.
And that was my motion.
On the discussion, I would say that the capital improvement part of that, which you mentioned several things here, came before the board, and the board has had the preliminary budget and made a list of things that are subject to further discussion, and that's one of them, the capital improvements. And so that will be discussed, and I am going to guess it's going to be approved as part of the budget.
Well, Stuart, I want to thank you and Ariana for all your hard work on this. It's nice that we've come to consensus on something.
Okay, well, now we go to part two.
Thank you.
The other issue, the only thing that might be relevant in the budget process is, do we want to put something in the budget pending the outcome of what the boards decide and what the opinion says and all of that now, or deal with it later? Because I don't think you're going to have, certainly not going to have the answer probably by the time that we
Well, let's
approve
try
this
and get
budget.
it.
The capital part, no problem, because we know
That's
what that
included.
is.
We
That-
agreed at the last meeting to include it. It's in.
Well, it's on the list, but I
No.
think we have 3 votes here, so you can say
I
it's
think
approved.
I
Stuart,
can-
I think that's a good idea.
think it's a great idea, Stuart.
If you were to
budget
propose it,
Preliminary.
saying
Propose it.
such that Sally is pursuing a comptroller's
No,
opinion.
the committee is.
Oh,
Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I am pursuing
No.
the comptroller's opinion.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Okay.
We
I
are
already started.
collectively pursuing
Okay,
it.
what I'm saying is that to
I'm going to
propose
control
it,
myself anyway, so.
to propose it based on the fact that the committee is going to seek further guidance and justification, I think that would be a nice thing to do.
Well, I think
Thank
it
you.
might be prudent to set that money aside, and that doesn't say how it's going to end up, but it says if it ends
I
up
agree.
one way, then you have the money.
I agree,
Yeah.
right, because
Then
otherwise,
the final issue is, and there are people on both sides of that in the village, and I don't know what there are in the town, but, you know, it's been talked of for a few years, it was this municipal agreement that we never seemed to come to. Well, why doesn't the village take over running it? And there are people in the village who would like to do that. I don't know why, but
It was your idea. That's why.
no, I don't think so. But you know, that and all kidding aside, you know, that's a possibility. But if the village did do that and the town agreed to do that, then I think the way it would be run would probably look a lot different. So that's a more global issue that future boards can talk about. But
I agree.
there's three things: the capital things, which I think are pretty well resolved.
Done.
Just wanna
The
thank
other
you
one,
for
which we could
talking.
set the money aside and see if we're going to spend it later, and then the other issue, which if someone has courage, they ought to put on the table and see if they can, you know, maybe the village will take it over or not, but really have a serious discussion, because if the town's running and it's losing $60,000 a year, and maybe that's on purpose because it's something you're providing to the community, it's a whole philosophical question there. So that's going to take a lot of debate to decide how to handle that one. So that one's not going to happen tomorrow.
Hiring the village accountants to do a study.
I just
want to make one other statement, and that is, we're going to be handling the fire contract in the same way. And we've had some discussions with the village. We've come up with a solution that we think is fair and balanced on both sides, and we'll be presenting final numbers on that to our board at our next meeting.
Okay, I just need to go back to the pool again, because I really, you know, I understand if the village was to take it over, there might be a different way to run it, obviously, whatever. However, I think it needs to be understood that there's so many lifeguards you need in order to, you know, legally manage the pool to safety standards. So you have to have so many lifeguards for how big the pool is, for so many hours and whatever the cost is. There's a cost for the lifeguards. There's a cost for the supplies and the chlorine and the opening and the closing. And that's the cost. It's a cost. It's not a matter of us putting in more cost or less cost or this cost. The costs are what they are. Bill has run that pool for a very, very long time. His costs don't change. His budgets don't change that much. It's what it costs to manage the pool. We have chosen as two boards to just have a certain, you know, charge a certain amount of money. We could say that the pool will be open just July and August and not open at Memorial Day, you know, and not have it open May and June, and just say July and August, and there won't be a loss. You know, I mean, it's really that simple. It's not that the town, per se, as we operated, are making wrong choices. There's a choice amongst the community of how long they want it open, you know, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, you know, on Saturdays and Sundays for so many hours, and there's a cost associated. And if these two boards should say we want less hours, less time, there won't be an operating loss. End of story. It's not operating it wrong or right. It's the choice of the two boards of what kind of pool services you want to offer to the community.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying that you have a philosophical question to answer. If you want to run it so it's not costing $60,000 a year, then you're going to charge more money or something, and that has to be be in a different model. That's all. So. And it's going to take a while to hammer that out, because I'm sure there's a lot of differences of opinion.
Well, I'm sorry, I just have to say that we have looked at raising the prices. We've raised them incrementally. Moriallo Pool is a community pool, and it serves a smaller community than the county pool. Of course we can raise prices, but then it will not become affordable for the members of our community who use it the most, and we've never wanted to take that path. And I would like to point out that every single department of the town and the village operates at a loss. That's why we have taxes. The highway department, the DPW, I mean, you could call those all a loss. That's why people have to be taxed to pay for them. So this is a service that our elected officials choose to provide for our community, and it does cost money that the taxpayers are charged. And if at the end of the day the village doesn't feel that this is a service that we should be providing, and you don't allocate the money, then we won't open the pool on Memorial Day.
I don't really want to prolong this discussion. I was polite and I put this on the agenda, Kitty, because you asked for it at the last minute. We are here for a single item agenda, and that was to interview and make, as best we could, a decision regarding the interviews we had.
Well, Sally, I have requested that this be on our joint agenda for every joint meeting that we've had since last November.
It was just added this weekend.
I have failed to get it added at every other meeting.
And that's partly because every time we tried to set the agenda.
Anyway, I have a motion on the floor. I think the boards ought to put this into the pool committee.
They already.
We haven't voted on it.
I understand that.
And a controller's, and I would like to seek that controller's opinion. I've already begun.
Well,
so that's the motion.
Well,
and it's been seconded. So let's vote on it.
Well, I'm not going to, okay, well, go ahead, go ahead.
I have no problem with asking for the opinion of the comptroller, but I think at least the town or the village attorney ought to look at the question so that it's a meaningful answer that comes back, how it's set forth. But I really question whether it's going to be helpful. I mean, as far as the capital, sending it to this committee to decide what we're going to do the parking lot or do we need the slide and all that. Those are the kind of things that the subcommittee can do. But if you're going to send it to the subcommittee to answer these philosophical questions, it's just going to come back and we're going to do this all over again. So, I mean, I'm happy, not happy because we meet all the time, but if you think it's helpful, we can do that. But I don't think that subcommittee is going to have much progress on the more global issue, because you can see that it's going to take a lot of debate to see to what extent the community wants to underwrite the recreation program, and whether that 4-person committee is going to have any effect on that at all. I'm really doubtful. I'm willing to do it, but I just don't see it getting very far.
So
maybe you do.
It would just get bumped back, and
I would
be back here again on the same
I would
issue.
guess that on the specific questions, yes, but on that one, I don't know.
I agree with Stuart, because I think that ultimately it's an appropriation. It's an appropriation of money, and therefore would have to be approved by the village board and not by 2 of its trustees. So in that sense...
No, but they could make a recommendation.
They could make a recommendation, and I get a sense of the recommendation at a suggestion that could it potentially be suggested to put the $16,000 into the village budget just in case, because...
Pending the comptroller's opinion?
Pending,
Okay.
yeah.
I will agree to that, Jim.
And I'm tending to agree now, Sally, with Stuart, that maybe it's an unnecessary exercise for us to do what you will eventually do once you're in receipt of the comptroller's opinion.
I think Jean's idea is good.
I bet you the comptroller's opinion will say you can do what you want to do.
Want to bet dinner?
I'll bet you can.
Okay, and who is drafting the letter to the comptroller?
Anybody from the village?
Well, Stuart suggested the town and village attorneys.
Well, I think that if Sally has a specific question or questions she wants to ask, that, she should draft it, but then I think one of the attorneys should look at it for format, just so that we get the answer to the specific question, so we won't have to do it again.
I think it would only be fair that both the village and the town get to look at the question, so when we get the answer, we don't challenge the answer because we didn't like the way the question was asked.
That would be fine.
Well, it would even be better if the town had checked with the comptroller before they made the request.
We don't have a problem.
Do we
That's
have any
what-
other business tonight?
Yes, the parades, we need to,
Okay, we made a decision to fund 3 parades, right?
we basically, when we did the police budget, because it was stated that, at last year by some village board members that the town shouldn't really have a say on.
We agreed to fund 3 parades at 975. 3.
Oh, the new ones, yes.
We agreed to fund 3 parades at
Well, let's step back though, because we ended up not putting really money into the budget this year for the police. For parades, because we had sort of said we were stepping back from parades and letting the village handle the parades, since, it's been said it's their streets and whatever. So we said, fine, it's their streets, they can have the parades. We didn't put money into the budget this year, but we said we would put money in for Memorial Day and Halloween.
Right.
So that's where we're at.
So we talked to Chief of Police. He indicated to us the cost of a parade for police is about $1,300
Right.
per parade. We took that figure, again, applying the 3/4, 1/4 formula, and we agreed to pay
I think you need to step back, I'm sorry, Kevin, just from the fact that because the village approved certain parades, the village approved parades, the chief turned the parades down because there wasn't funding for the parades. It got put into the town board's lap.
But we're talking about just 3
I
parades.
know,
We just
but it's a
did
big,
eight
but it's
tomorrow.
not, but it's a bigger issue than just 3 parades, because the village is going to continue to keep approving parades, because there's a process that gives them the right, and we're going to be back here again, over and over again.
Sally made the suggestion that we form a subcommittee to handle
Which I
this the
did.
same way we handle other things. And I think for right now, at this board meeting, we can address what Kevin's talking about.
Okay, I just
and then we can
have
a.
That's fine, and I have no problem with that, as long as you understand that if you guys, because the process
I
is.
understand this completely. I don't think anybody at this table right now is not looking for a solution. I think I saw the emails, and I think that the only person who was against a lot of what was being said is not present. So I think that we can certainly. We need to figure out something.
Right. A policy.
A policy, and I think it's clear that on our end, it's too labor intensive, and on the applicant's end, it's too labor intensive, and it's a totally ridiculous, convoluted
And for the
process.
applicant,
So-
it's absurd.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you understand that the village will not be approving any more parades until we have a policy in place.
So yes, we will move on this.
No.
No, that's
Just
not necessarily.
My recommendation, because I think Carol Conley is absolutely right.
Right.
I think we need a committee, just like we formed for Moriella Pool.
Yeah.
2 town board members, 2 village board members, a member from the police commission, and the chief of police, and come up with a workable, practical policy on parades in this community. Because what happened, Kevin, was before any of us took office, the whole way parades had been done was unilaterally changed by the town. Susan has had to live with it, the police commission has had to live with it, and I think what we need to, and the village has had to live with it, I think what we need to do is sit down together and come up with a policy and practice.
I think
that
everyone
works.
agrees with that.
We agreed with that 10 minutes ago.
So Kevin's gonna go back to the 3 parades on the table, and then we just have to understand that if any parade gets approved before the policy's in place, we'll be back here. Go
Okay,
ahead.
what do we do about the 3 that we have allocated
me.
funding for?
Who's on the
We have 3/4 of the funding for these 3 parades. Is the village willing to meet us for the additional 1/4?
I am, but I only speak for myself.
It's $325 per parade.
I think that the philosophical question
Is again.
is the whole thing about if the police is paid for from the A fund and anybody in the town is having an activity, then the police should provide protection. I'm not asking you to agree with that. I mean, just that's position 1. And there are other positions on the village board, and there's other proposals been made, such as forming a fire police unit, so we don't have to pay the state police and the sheriff and everybody time and a half or whatever it is. They're, looking for other solutions other than just money. And so this is a larger issue before the village board, which we'd very much like to solve. And, so I hope you and Katie can be on the subcommittee.
Well, one of the things I just want to propose while we have the village board here is that in looking at the state DOT section of the law that talks about this, they say that when the village is going to stop traffic for more than 10 minutes, the village needs to put up detour signs. And it occurred to me that if the village started doing that, and perhaps have DPW people there, I mean, we'll still provide police, but one of the things that really upsets me about these parades is that we have idling police cars at every intersection for, it can be up to a couple of hours. And if we simply had some of these detour signs and a few human beings standing there directing traffic, I mean, we're still going to have to provide some police protection. But I, for one, would really like to reduce the number of idling vehicles that it requires. I know you would.
I know, that's why you're looking at me. But
it
when
is
the
why I'm looking
DPW
at
does
you.
it, they also idle. And when I asked them to shut their vehicle off, they said that they couldn't because the light on top is what was alerting the cars coming, and that couldn't be running without it. So this is a separate issue also. But
we need Priuses.
I'm not going to dig my heels in for $1,000 in order, and not just move forward with these parades. I can't obviously speak for anybody else about that, but I am in favor of moving forward with splitting it for right now, allowing the upcoming parades that are already on the table to continue to happen, and in the interim we will be able to figure out a solution.
Well,
and I don't think it's going to be that hard to figure out. We just have to sit down and do it.
We need the committee to do it. I'm willing to serve on the committee from the village. Who else from the village?
Well, all right.
All right. 2 from the town.
You're the one who knows about the ugly cars.
Who's in the parade group here? Gene, you're a big parade
I'm on
person.
every committee.
I think Kitty. I think Kitty and Jean.
I'm on the fire committee.
Well, Jean can't meet during.
I'm sorry, don't volunteer me. I am not available through June, but thank you
Who
for
knows
asking.
the history? That's the person that should be on the committee, whoever knows the parade history.
Well, the three of us are brand new. All I can say is the
God.
parade history, when I was here years ago, and the
Wow.
parade history today is completely different. Because when I was here last time, the town approved the parades, we paid for the parades, end of story, we either budgeted or we didn't.
All right.
Okay, Kevin.
And I will
Thank
too.
you.
And Kitty.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Kitty,
good.
again.
On the condition that we figure out these three parades tonight.
We're gonna do that.
Okay. I mean, we're going to get the policy. We'll know what we're doing in the future.
You have
But we
three-
have a Little League parade, a Pride parade, and the regatta coming up. And we need to make sure that we have the funding for them.
Well, you're assuming, and see, this is one of my questions. Who says what parades we need police for this? That's what we're gonna have.
The state.
The chief. The chief said. Well, first of all,
There's no state law.
Yeah, there is, actually.
Let me
It
just
was
say,
after the
right now, till the policy changes, okay? The policy in place is the village approves it. It comes to the town where we send it to. I don't know. The village approves it, okay? It comes to you guys. You approve it. That's where it starts, and that's where the problem begins. You approve it. It comes to us. We send it to the police. The police looks at it for the route. They look for it to see how many kind of officers they need. They approve it for safety, and then it comes back to the town board. We then end up putting our stamp on it. That's
I
the
don't want to
process
prolong
as
this
of now.
conversation, but the process when I first came into the office was exactly the opposite. And maybe it's just that people are coming and applying to the village first, whereas
because it's going to be
previously.
Because the mayor said they could.
Well, I think this is maybe this started when we got our new clerk and things just. Because the forms are village forms, people started coming here, and so the process reversed. But when I first took office, the process was actually the opposite, where they came to the town first, the town sent it to the police, and then it would come to the village for approval. And I thought that was, equally convoluted, but actually a better method.
Well, that's equally convoluted, but at the end of the day,
because the police
we
got
wouldn't
it
have the
first.
problem. We wouldn't have the problems if it came to the town first. Because then if the town approves it, it's our obligation to provide the police.
That was
Where
the town
sticking
policy.
point is because now it's going to you first, it comes to us with you having already approved it, so if we can't fund it, we're the bad guys.
I
And
totally
that's-
get what's going on.
That's why we need
there was
to get
an
this
issue.
straightened out.
But, okay.
Randall's gonna sit with us.
I
Chief
remember
Snyder. Good, let's
a
go.
very different process prior to you being.
I'm sure. So okay, but
so we're back to
tonight
these three
we need
nights.
to figure out these 3 items, and then the 4 of us will figure out a meeting date after this meeting.
Excuse me, I still have a motion on the floor regarding what we're doing with the Moriella pool. Now, we never voted on it.
We didn't.
Did you withdraw that?
No, I will withdraw it if we agree to what Jean's proposing.
Oh, gosh.
What was Jean proposing?
Jean is proposing that we seek a comptroller's
We seek the comptroller's opinion.
And Stuart is asking that I run
we
that
earmark
request
some of this-
through
the
either
funding.
Joe or...
Yeah. So how about we?
It should be. I mean, the request when you write up the request, send it to me.
No, I'm
You
not sending it to you. I'm sending it to the
Oh, okay.
attorneys.
Well, you can send it to Stuart and you can send it to Kevin. I just feel.
No, to Joe and Joe.
You sent it to both attorneys.
Yes.
Okay.
For their comments on format.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 just,
Okay.
I want to be
I don't
clear.
think we need to, but but there's a motion.
Well,
I don't care.
because you're going to do an appropriation, the motion is that you're going to do this $16,000 set aside on the condition that Sally.
No, that's a separate thing.
Okay.
Well, no, it wasn't.
It wasn't really.
We were asking
It wasn't in the
if-
original motion.
Yeah.
if they would consider putting it in their
And
budget,
Ariana said yes, so that's a
because,
separate thing.
if their budget is adopted without it in there, there will be no opportunity to
Right.
have that $16,000 this summer when the pool is open.
So we've
So-
agreed to put it on the discussion list for our
Yeah.
Thank you.
budget, which continues soon.
Okay.
Are we voting on this motion?
Or agreeing to it, I don't care.
Sally, do town board members have to even vote on that?
I don't
Well,
think
actually, it's
so.
an appropriation to Joe Moriello for him to look at this. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Or you
So
could-
I don't even
Why don't
need
you just
it.
have the village attorney look at it
No,
as part of
because-
his retainer?
You can do that, but at the end of the day, if we don't see how you ask the question and you get an opinion.
Right, we
It
get
doesn't
it.
matter, I'm calling Joe, I'm calling the controller that we work with tomorrow
It's
anyway,
fine.
so it doesn't matter.
You check and I'll check.
I move to expend up to $1,000 on Joe Moriello to review whatever it is. All
Okay.
right, 200? What do you want, Susan?
Can-
We need to appropriate money for Joe Moriello to review it.
I don't think we need to spend a dime on Joe Mariano.
I
Let's just have the village send a request. The request is gonna be very simple. It's whether they can spend additional money. If they choose to.
No.
Why not?
No,
It's
Kevin,
not
Kevin,
gonna be
Kevin,
that
it's
simple.
Kevin,
It's not
you
that
know
simple.
better
Can
than
we
anybody
spend
that the way
additional
you
money?
pose a
It's gonna
question
be
determines the
all
answer.
Twisted between town and village and A fund and 25%, and so we do need.
I already know what the answer is, so
Fine.
I'm willing to let them do it.
If
Look,
the
let's
question
just-
is,
look,
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, let's just do it this way. Sally's gonna ask the controller, whatever way Sally wants to ask the controller.
And if you don't
I'm gonna
like it,
call-
you don't have to
And I'm
accept
gonna
it.
call Jerry Bukowski, who's our controller, who did the audit for us, and I'm gonna talk to him, and then I'll get him to put in writing what he tells me. Sally will get
Send it
whatever
to
she
Sally
wants,
and see what
and
she
we'll
says.
just go
all
from
right,
there.
let's get two opinions.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
It's not
Are we
spending.
done?
I'm going to move that we go into executive session.
No, we do the parade.
He's not done.
We're not done with the parade. We're very close.
We have a lot to
thought
get
we were.
done.
I know, but the more we prolong it, the
Right.
longer it's gonna take to get to that
Ariana,
point.
it's 325 for parade that would have to come from the village. 325.
So
Point of-
975 total.
Point of information, is this for our budget up through May, or is this next year we're talking about?
No, it's for these
Right
parades
now.
coming up right now, the
All right,
regatta, the
so
full
that's money
regatta,
from our current
Pride.
budget you want
Yeah.
to talk about? Okay.
Regatta, Pride, and the Little League.
Actually,
that's
Pride,
Which all got
Pride would
approved.
be
That's fund
Which
balance.
all,
next
which all
year.
got approved by the village board, or the village.
I guess
We
the
have
question
not
is, do we-
approved any
I'm
of
just saying, the
those.
whoever, whatever process it is,
We have not approved a gay pride parade yet. That has not
It
come
starts-
before
it
the
starts-
village
it's-
board.
Well, it's come to the
it starts with you
police.
guys, we get it, and it goes to the
We didn't
police.
get it.
It can't come to us before it goes to you.
I mean, the banner that went along
We have
with
not
it?
even acted on the banner yet. We do not have any parade requests in front of us. The last parade request we had was from Elding Memorial Library regarding
Right,
the dog
I
walk.
remember that.
That's it, kiddies. We do not have anything from Gay Pride. We do not have anything from Memorial Day. We just
No,
assume
it's
that
gay,
because
no,
we know we
no,
do
Memorial
it.
no,
Day
it's
is
Gay
done.
Pride, Little League, and the regatta.
We do not have Little League and we do not have the regatta.
We definitely don't have the regatta. I know we have
No.
not seen that.
And we haven't done the Gay Pride. The only thing we have from
These
Gay
have not
Pride
come
is a
before us
request
for-
for a
we did
banner,
not
which
approve
they
them.
haven't gotten back to us yet.
But you're gonna have them.
Right.
Because they're going to occur
Well,
on Main
Exactly.
Street.
I think the only thing, the point is that we have not seen them yet. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't approve them, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to come before us. So I
But
think we
if
should
you've
figure out what
approved
we
them,
will
then
do.
you haven't sent them
But
over.
wait, something
I
has happened.
didn't
They
approve
came-
anything.
We don't approve anything.
They've already come to the police chief. That's how, and he came to us and said, I don't have the money in my budget for these 3 parades that the village approved.
maybe
He's telling you
maybe the
incorrectly.
village clerk got the applications, sent them over before bringing them to us,
Okay.
so we had information, because there's a place on it that says whether or not it needs
Please
the
review,
protection.
right.
And that usually has something marked on it before we approve it.
Isn't it
Yep.
funny that it's coming before you right now? That's the process we have to work out, though.
Oh,
That's what the committee's going to do.
So, okay, I think the
Because there are
bottom
too
line
many
is
hands in this
975.
pudding.
This is the amount of money that we would need to allocate for it. The question that we would need answered, and I like to check with Nancy before getting anything financially approved by the board. I would think it's safe to say that we've got that kind of money. Can we, since we haven't even approved these parades yet, can we do this at our next meeting on April 10th?
Not without an application for the parade.
I wasn't asking you, I was asking the town board.
They don't know village policy.
I'm saying, can we stop this discussion tonight? And
just
is it
look
okay
when
with
they are.
everybody here if we approve this at our next meeting, provided that we get the application?
No, we asked you for
That's a wonderful
$375 because we.
All right. So they're asking $375.
Out of the $1,300, we're asking you for $375.
They're asking for
No, $325 per parade,
$325 per parade, $975 total.
Right, but it's costing us this.
Okay.
$325 is 1/4.
Government inefficiency.
I'm saying, we're not doing anything tonight. I'm just making sure it's okay
Do
with
we have
everybody that we do now.
$975 in the fund balance? Should we get that application? Yes.
That's all I'm asking.
So
Thank you,
that means,
Sally.
so does
You're
that mean the
welcome.
three of you made a motion that if you should get the application, that you will approve these three parades for $975?
I didn't make a motion, I just asked you if that was okay if
I
we
don't
don't
think-
do this tonight. But can we have a gentleman, a ladies' agreement?
Absolutely.
But this is not a 2013-14 budget. This is
Some
out
of
of the
it-
current budget.
some of it-
None of it is.
But the Pride
It'd be nice if you made
Parade
the motion,
could
though,
be your
that the three of
next
you agree, so
budget.
then this way it's not a discussion at the next meeting.
I think that that's just too contentious right now.
I do
I
too.
promise
Right.
you, I will put it on the agenda. and-
That's what you gotta do is get it on the agenda, that's all.
Yeah, I promise you, I
And
will.
it's not, Stuart, it is not a budgetary item. It is a current
Right, I got it. That's
item.
why I asked the
We're
question.
not-
Then we,
moving
by next
properly with
year,
this right
will
now.
have the practice in
Right, thank
place.
you.
We have made so much progress tonight.
I doubt it.
Scary.
I'm moving for executive session.
We did, Sally, we ended up solving it.
Yes, we
Having
did.
a conversation.
Let's go. Come on.
Sally made a motion to go into executive discussion to discuss lawyers and on consolidation. Is there a second? I will second it for purposes of discussion. Is anybody against going in right now to talk about at least what
To
we're thinking and
discuss
feeling?
contracts with lawyers?
Yes.
I think I have to recuse myself.
What?
No, you don't. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay, motion so carried.
Aye, but, we'll talk about it off the camera.
Different place for executive.
Where are we going?
We do.
Office.
Oh, yeah, especially.
Do we turn
Thank
this?
you all for,
How do you do it?
if we should make a decision, we'll come out and tell you tomorrow. I'll vote.
If it's before 10:30, I'll be there.
Okay, so you're still gonna be here for, okay.
Okay.
wouldn't that be nice?
No, I think,
I know you need it more yellow. Climb over the fence.
Oh my God.
There you go.
I've heard stories
I
that
have
others.
too.
Can you
I
meet
have
during the
too.
day,
Susan
Kevin?
can do it.
Okay. And Randall, you can meet during the day?
do not have a